The Saemon with a mysterious smile told Katarin about the impregnability of the castle of Tillman, the majestic stronghold, who in 200 years fell before any enemy, as if fate itself kept its walls. Katarina was perplexed why he suddenly spoke about this, because at any moment they could be caught, but the guy only waved his hand frivolously, assuring that no one would stick here, and she would better deal with her thoughts. He enthusiastically stated that this was not for long, because he wanted to show her how, at this time of the day, nature paints the surroundings in enchanting shades. But the girl only shrugged, not understanding that he finds special in this. Looking at the well-groomed lands of the nobility, Katarina noticed that they had no place here. But the seaman dreamily said that it may soon buy a house in these parts, because it would soon be raised to the middle magician. He proudly said that he wrote an innovative dissertation about the golems, and she impressed, so if the elder approves his works, then the long-awaited increase is not far off. Even if the house turns out to be modest, he will still be able to acquire a plot of land where they can live together, far from all worries. Seeing the girl embarrassedly looked away, he suddenly asked if she would agree to become his wife, because she suffered too much because of him, and he vowed to make her the happiest woman in the world. Katarina only gently ran a finger over his lips, and with a sly smile noticed that maybe for a start it was worth receiving the promised increase. In addition, she admitted that she did not even assume that their fate would lead them to such a moment, but it seems this is inevitable. In those days, it seemed to them that happiness was finally in their hands, but once the Simon accidentally overheard a conversation from which he realized that someone had appropriated his goal management technique. This man confidently talked with the Duke, praising himself for supposedly revolutionary ideas and hinting that nothing would have happened without his financial support. Awareness of the stamps fell on Simon like a lightning blow, because he believed that honest work could change his life, but it turned out that it was an illusion. Even if he had exhausted himself with work until the end of his days, those who stood above would always find a way to leave him with nothing. Suddenly, the conversation accepted an unexpected turn. It came to the mysterious sentence that the stranger put forward the Duke. The Duke grunted condescendingly, recalling that he remembered the agreements, but expressed doubt whether that girl was really worthy of attention, because she is not at all from the nobility. At that moment, several armed guards dragged Katarine, and her appearance forced the Simon to get colder with rage. The girl looked beaten, and when her gaze met with him, only a void and lost hope splashed in her eyes. He realized that this whole conspiracy concerns not only him, but also the most dear girl, and he so naively believed in justice. Anger flared up in his soul, because they dared to take from him the one whom he vowed to protect, and now he could not just stand and watch her fate decide without her consent. The man who stole the merits of Simon, with a smug smile, noticed that Katarina was known in the district not only by beauty, but also with a rebellious disposition, and the Duke said in response if it were not for its origin, she could live another life. Fury was in full swing in the Saemon, because he dreamed of the future with Katarina, and now he saw his hopes scattered to dust, and he decided that he would not allow this to happen. Without hesitation, he rushed to the attack, trying to punish the Duke and the bastard who stole his work, but he knew that he had little chance against them. He screamed, demanding that Katarin immediately let go, but in response he only heard ridicule, and saw how those who held her did not even think to let go. One of the senior magicians watching the stage cast a bored gaze at him and said lazily that the guy seemed completely crazy. A man who has a force that surpasses the Simon at times squints contemptuously, and grinning, recalled that this worthless youth should know his place. After all, he was just dust under the feet of noble gentlemen. After the loud, full of pathos, the body of Simon pierced the unbearable, crushing wave of magical energy, as if the universe itself decided to tear it to pieces. Katarina, seeing how her lover was under the flurry of this crushing power, felt fear, piercing her heart with an icy claw of panic. And he, like a puppet, in which all the threads suddenly broke, collapsed onto the cold ground, having lost his last strength. However, the fate, which played a cruel joke with him, still did not take his life from him, but prepared another fate, a dungeon, where the darkness became his only interlocutor. There was not a single soul in the gloomy dungeon, except for nimble rats, silently shared this imprisonment with it. Their tenacious eyes gleamed in the dark, recalling its complete isolation. Having hunched over in the corner, he looked at these small creatures with an empty, detached expression, because one day his life was filled with meaning, and now it turned into a bottomless abyss of despair. At some point, his fingers clenched on the fragile body of the rat, and she, realizing her fate, burst into a heart-rending, piercing screech, violating the silence of the camera. The walls of the dungeon were dotted with careless hooks, dumb witnesses to his imprisonment, and looking at them, he tried to realize how he could withstand so much time in this hell. Submitted into thoughts, he did not even immediately feel how something sharp and cold stuck into his back. A spear holding his fate in the hands of the faceless guards. Those, discussing his miserable condition among themselves, with contempt noted that he had already reached the point that he was trying to gobble up the rat. But how could one expect different from the fallen magician who had lost his former glory? One of them lazily offered him a deal. Let him tell him everything that he knows, and if he will help him to call on Golem, freedom will immediately become his reward. But the hero did not even bother them with attention, resting his gaze on the floor as if they had not existed, which prompted the guards to the idea that he had finally broken after the death of that girl. Curiosity prevailed, and one of them asked why she died, to which he received an indifferent answer. She set off her life, wanting to maintain her honor, and what a ridiculous, meaningless death. With a sigh, they noted that such a charming girl should not die so stupid, and even expressed easy sadness about this. However, the Simone these words became hot iron, fusing in his soul bubbling rage, and not finding a way out, he dug into his own skin, forcing blood to ooze from wounds. A deep regret was seething in his heart, because Katarina died precisely because of him, and he was powerless to change the past. Suddenly, the guards noticed the strange behavior of the rats. They were not just rushing about, but as if they were waiting for something, frozen in the tense expectation. An ominous foreboding hung in the air, and even the course of the guards realized that something supernatural was clearly happening here. One of them, not wanting to take risks, threw up the spear, intending to kill the rodents, but his partner suddenly stopped him, offering to leave at least one alive. However, this precaution turned out to be delayed. By that time, one of the rats was already lifelessly lying on the stone floor, and a mysterious symbol flickered on its wool. It was a pentagram, an ancient sign indicating that someone enveloped these creatures with a magical seal, making them tools of his will. The guards stared at the luminous pattern with amazement, realizing that the case was taking a very gloomy turn. The culprit was, of course, the Simon, who, even being in a state of complete exhaustion, managed to direct his strength to establish a connection with these creatures. Realizing that it was he who was behind this witchcraft, the guards yelled in a panic, demanding that they immediately stop this horror. Simon asked them in surprise. Did they really want him to stop, but he just started. When the magic circle finally completed his creation in a tight chamber, the young man confidently extended his hand and allowed the energy to absorb his skin. As soon as magic penetrated into space, rats marked by the same symbols began to rush in panic, as if feeling the approach of something inevitable. A bitter thought flared up in the hero's head again. If he would have been a little stronger, Katarina would not have disappeared in this merciless world. Anger and despair merged together, and he, even not noticing, directed more and more his strength in miserable creatures, making them vessels of his rage. Everything went according to his will, until suddenly the space shuddered, and the raging energy did not explode, marked by the birth of something new. His silhouette appeared from a thick, swirling dust, but a creature that should not exist was already looming behind. Amazed guards looked at him in horror, realizing that a huge creation in front of them was just a few minutes ago a regular rat. The guy cast a cold look at them and then grinned, noting that the expression of their faces exactly repeated the fear of Katarina in her last moments. He has repeatedly tried to comprehend the causes of everything that was happening, but each time he came to only one conclusion: there is no violation. Nevertheless, one question corroded his soul. Why fate left him alive if he took everything that was important from him? Now his path was predetermined. He will destroy this world that he stole the most expensive from him, and let no one dare to dream of happiness. He closed his eyes, representing Katarina's voice, but now there was no place for pity. Now he will become stronger than ever. Without hesitation, he clenched his fists and vowed that he would gain strength and power at all costs, because only in this way he could fulfill his revenge. Madness flashed in his eyes when he whispered hoarsely that from that moment his life would be devoted to only one goal: division. Far from here in luxurious chambers, the old man who imprisoned him in prison with cold horror realized that the monster whom he locked was now freed. And yet instead of fear, he only grinned contemptuously, calling the young man a fool that he contacted dark magic and demons. But Simon, who became the shadow of himself, only grinned in response and threw the indifferent that from that. The Duke, seeing the power that came from the guy, in an instant lost his pride and, trembling, began to pray for mercy, offering him power. Deprived of pride and principles, this person was ready for anything, just to save his insignificant life. But the hero, looking at him through the prism of hatred, only with a grin asked how he will fulfill his desires if he could not return the dead. After all, everyone perfectly understood that the resurrection of the dead was the limit that even the highest magic could not cross. Destroying everything that was met in his way, the guy did not think about anything other than this damned reality, in which he will wipe everything to the ground for the sake of Katarina. Meanwhile, far beyond the boundaries of this tragedy, the king, standing in front of the altar, blessed one of his knights, calling him for great purpose. This man, a legendary warrior recognized by the defender of the kingdom, bore the name Lacan. His Majesty, with all sincerity in his voice, asked him to save the world, mired in bottomless darkness and chaos. The army of demons, covered in an endless whirlpool of darkness, destroyed everything in its path, ruthlessly erasing the sacred lands and innocent lives. They fell victims of a terrible campaign that only the ashes of the two kingdoms and one powerful duchy left behind. And now everything that remained between the death of the world and the hope of salvation is a man named Lacan. The king, despite his greatness, was inclined to him, asking him to fulfill his last duty, to destroy the king of demons and return the light to this world. Lacan, without hesitation, accepted the order and, with cold determination, led his troops into a fateful battle. Soon his sword soared into the air, reflecting the rays of the setting sun when he turned to the soldiers gathered on the lands of the Holy Empire Ardean. With iron confidence in his voice, he proclaimed that the light of the great empire was fading away, and the shadows of darkness are already gathering over the continent of the boat. But even in the face of an inevitable disaster, they will not flinch and will not be inclined, because in their hearts faith in their loved ones burns. Today, in the name of the world, and in the name of everyone who is waiting for their victory, they will go into battle to destroy the king of demons and become the last ray of hope. Once Katarina turned to Seaman with anxiety in her eyes and asked if he had heard about the child who was chopped off for theft of a piece of bread. He hastily looked around and in a whisper told her to speak quieter, because one could pay for such words. But the girl was not going to be silent. She was warmly indignant, saying that the nobles established cruel laws only because they themselves never knew the fear of hunger. She was unbearable to realize that the fate of the child was decided not by his actions, but only to the place in which he was born. Simon perfectly understood the bitter truth in her words, but he also realized that he was not able to change this world. He only said that after all the days could come when the status will mean nothing, and they will live on a par with everyone. Hearing these words, Katarina flashed and shouted with a challenge that it was pointless to wait for a miracle, because no one would bring a change on a silver tray. But Simon did not understand what she wants to say with this. She looked him directly in the eye and firmly stated that if they really want to change this cruel world, they should start with themselves. Otherwise, their children, like them, will be forced to suffer, becoming hostages of injustice. From these words, Seaman's hands trembled, and a stack of books that he held scattered on the floor with a knock. He was embarrassed, trying to translate the conversation as a joke, and asked what other children, if they were not even married. But Katarina only grinned, recalling that this issue was still open. Her straightforwardness drove the guy into the paint, and lowering his head muttered, which of course was going to, but so far it was simply not ready. Katarina, squinting, tilted her head and clarified, so nevertheless gather or not, and without waiting for a confident answer, made him admit. Having received the desired yes, she only laughed, teasing him, which probably, except for her, no one would have left for such a shy guy. Now, standing in the middle of the bloody field of the battle, where swords dug into the flesh and the earth was saturated with magic, Simon recalled this carefree conversation that seemed so far to him. In his thoughts he turned to his lover, whispering that it would end soon, and their dream of the new world will finally become a reality. He took this path from him for many years, but now his victory was closer than ever. Right in front of him in the combat system, there were thousands of soldiers who were ready to fight for their ideals, for their families, for the order that he sought to destroy. At the head of their troops stood Lacan, who, raising his sparkling blade, turned to the king of demons with hatred, accusing him of the sufferings of the whole world. His voice sounded like a thunder when he swore that it was today that he would put an end to this madness. He even called to God and justice, promising that Seaman would have to answer for all the atrocities that he had committed. In response, the king of demons erupted with a booming, frightening laughter, echoing at the battlefield. He sarcastically noted that he again hears high, parody speeches about God and justice. Do they really believe that they can judge him? Do these people seriously hope that he is frightened by ghostly words about justice, which never existed in this world? Lacan gritted his teeth and, squeezing the sword, shouted that the greatest army of the empire was going on with him, and they would make him pay for everything. He swore that this day would become the last for the king of demons, who sowed chaos for so long, But Simon only smiled, knowing that the truth was completely different. Warriors filled with determination, with combat cliches, rushed on the attack, wanting to protect the world in which they believed. But even when hundreds of fighters rushed forward, Simon did not budge, without showing a drop of fear of their onslaught. Instead, he only asked with a mockery who they were to judge him, as if they were not stained with blood. After all, the day when he lost Katarin became a moment when justice disappeared from this world. In the blink of an eye, a magic circle broke out under his feet, which sensitively caught the approach of enemies. But Vladika Demons only grunted, continuing to repeat that he no longer believes in their miserable illusions of virtue. That is why he will show them the only truth that now matters to him. And this truth is power, unlimited and frightening, the one that is now tearing out of it. Along with this stream of energy, a giant golem burst from the earth, which became his unshakable guard. Lacan, although he expected this, still could not hide his shock before this monstrous creature. Seeing a panic among the soldiers, he sharply raised his hand and ordered them to listen, because it was today that real justice will be born. The words of lies and fake faith will sink into oblivion, giving way to the beginning of a new era. But before these words managed to settle in the minds of warriors, countless golems rushed forward, sweeping away everything in their path. The ranks of the soldiers trembled, and confusion swept them. But one of the military leaders desperately urged them not to succumb to fear, because otherwise they will fall without a chance to win. However, Simon only laughed contemptuously, saying that they were just fools, because their strength is only a status that is behind which there is nothing. How are they, empty and weak, dare to oppose real government? The outcome is obvious, and this can only mean one thing. It will destroy them all. Lacan, full of righteous anger, roared and rushed into battle with a sword in his hands, saying that such a monstrous crime could not remain unpunished. And even in the face of frightening creatures rising above him, he fought easily, swearing that it was here and now that the madness of the King of Demons would stop. Simon could not hide surprise when, before his eyes, this man with one single blow crushed his elite golem, breaking it into dust. And he realized that he could not destroy the kingdom of Libya, no matter how many golems he sent there, and means that it is because of him. Then the guys turned to each other and said one phrase that their lives were numbered. The battle after that between people as well as golems has become even more bloodthirsty. As a result, there were a lot of victims among people, but also creatures were almost destroyed. At the same time, Lacan continued to fight, although he had already lost a lot of strength. But he was not going to stop the battles, and only repeated that it was already time to end. The last golem remained, which was soon destroyed, and the seaman stood right in front of him. The King of Demons realized that he was defeated, so he turned to his enemy. He asked if he was aware that this world has long been rotten. Therefore, if not for this person who defeated him, he could start all over again. Then the old foundations would be destroyed and destroyed, so that he curses the Lacan. And now his whole family will go to suffer until the end of his life. Only the King of Demons managed to make this speech, as his head was cut off. The next thing Seaman saw was a meeting with Katerina. She talked about when she smiles so much and when alive, healthy. It is at such moments that the girl feels happier than everyone in the world. After that, she climbed her toes and gently kissed him. The embarrassed, she said that she really loves him. And so seeing all this, the main character soon opened his eyes. He was no longer at all on the battlefield, and it was clear that it was not in his body. The first thing the guy thought about was that it was really a dream. To all this, it turns out that his head is still on his own shoulders. Although it is a little staggering, there is no wounds on the body at all, so it is not clear what happened. Then it became very interesting where he was never in such a room, so that he is in another country. But it is still completely incomprehensible why he is alive, because even dark magic will not help to return a person to life. If it were possible, then he would definitely use it, so why he is still alive. Trying to understand what really happened, he saw some portrait on the wall. It turned out that this portrait belongs to the Lacan, so it became not clear what the portrait of this villain is doing here. Suddenly, a man came running into the room to the guy and told the master that he finally came to his senses, and this joy. Then he hugged him tightly and said that he did not wake up for 2 weeks, and he already thought that they had lost him. Simon could not understand what else the gentleman, so he asked who it was. The interlocutor with horror asked him not to recognize him. This is terrible, but probably the master lost his own memory, and the man himself was to blame that he did not follow him enough. But even despite all the bitterness that he experienced, he is going to tell him everything. Most likely this is temporary, and perhaps he can remember everything if he begins his story. Very soon the guy will become the Lord, and is the heir to the Lacan family of the Bark Empire. He is also the true descendant of the great hero Luc de Lacan. Simon could not believe his ears and was discouraged in the fall from this information. It was because of this that he asked what this person means. Is it really true that Lacan died 500 years ago? Based on this situation, we can conclude that the guy was reborn by his descendant. There was no bounds to the guy's surprise, so he did not even understand what to do now. And suddenly he brought offending, as a result of which the butler was surprised. He immediately shouted to the young master that he should not run yet. But the Saman was just beside himself and thought, did everyone really want him to believe it? It became incomprehensible. Did they really hold him for a fool? Because there is absolutely no sense in this. And it turns out that this is just some kind of nonsense and nothing more. Having opened the door of the balcony, the guy saw what was shocked even more. It was some huge knight who was most likely a ghoul. Simon was surprised to ask what it was. And as a result, I came to the conclusion that if it really exists, then it means that everything that the person said recently, really, although the creature in front of him is very bizarre, and the hero thought that this was a weapon, much more advantage than the magic of golems. Although he imagined such magic only in his own dreams, but now we are right in front of him. The butler came up to talk with the Lord, and he asked to repeat his name. The interlocutor said that his name is Hans, and he is his humble servant. Simon immediately asked him what he was looking at. In response to this, the servant said that this creature is a giant, that is, two-legged weapons. The next thing the guy wanted to know was whether it was created on the basis of the magic of golems. The old man noted that partially this is true, because the giant was created using scientific technologies and magic. Thanks to new discoveries, unlike the golems that are controlled from afar, the opposite is true. Because it turns out that these migrants are controlled by the pilot, which is inside them. The main character again could not believe in his words, so asking again. And when I received confirmation, I thought to manage very advanced technologies from the inside. If at the same time Hans really tells the truth, then this is just an amazing weapon. Because in the fighting control, nothing threatens the outside, and the reaction rate is higher, not like the golems. In this weapon, all the problems that the guy faced using these creatures are solved. The subordinate could not understand what kind of strange reaction of the young master. Therefore, when he tried to leave, he asked where he was. At the same time, the Simon only thought that if this really exists, then it means that 500 years have passed straight. But he could not raise one thing in any way, why he nevertheless reborn to the descendants of his sworn enemy. Soon the servant in every place turned to my lord, and he was surprised due to the fact that the young guy grabbed the drink and began to drink it dejected. Therefore, he told the young lord that it was not necessary to do this. Still, you just need to stop. Suddenly the Saman turned his attention to him, and he noticed that the interlocutor told him that he was a descendant of Lacan. In this case it is not clear what it will be to drink or not, because his health is more than enough. And before he had time to finish this phrase, something changed in his body. It was because of this that the hero immediately spun and squatted, and then wondering what happened to his body, asked what happened. Hans informed him that he was trying to warn before that. It was a talk that he needed to be careful because of the curse. The guy asked in surprise the question of what curses we are talking about, because he does not remember anything. The old man realized that it was simply amazing. He expected this, but the guy really does not remember anything at all. Due to the fact that he did not answer the guy, he once again asked him about it. Hans began to tell a long story. The fact that the guy's predecessor gathered an army to defend himself from the Lord of the Demons, that he tried to destroy everything, and after the fierce of the battle, he established the world around the world. The guy realized that this story was long and asked to be in a short, and then he heard that the Lord Lacan was praised to save the world, but he died suddenly. And this happened for a lead reason, namely because of the curse of the King of Demons. Simon began to recall what happened between them, and realized that it was a matter in his hands. Because before his death, he told the hero of the empire that his family would suffer until the end of his life. Now the heroes became clear, but it was just terrible because he said all this when he was very angry. 500 years ago, the world faced a real disaster, and it was the King of Demons. His dark magic gave rise to the golems that were stronger than him in the army, and he killed countless warriors. Then it seemed that this man would capture the whole world. But thanks to the righteous warrior, this did not happen. This hero, as he later christened, killed the King of Demons, and the world again knew order. However, before his own death, the King of Demons imposed a curse on a warrior that led him and all the pedigree to death at a young age. The hero read this story and realized that everyone turned over and how they were captured. He in turn did not conjure anything, and they really believed that the curse can last so long. Although it makes no sense to blame anyone, because he himself is to blame for what he lost. Even in this case, why he was reborn precisely into the descendant of his sworn enemy very interesting. There is a rather strange feeling that it was his profile here, and not him. Although this is still his second chance, because he has not achieved his original goal, so he will be ashamed of Katarina. This same rotten world lasted another 500 years, so he is even afraid to imagine how much it became worse. At the same time, no matter how much time has passed, Since then, the guy is sure that he still has followers. So for starters now, you need to learn more about the current era, but if he can reunite with his followers, then this time he will definitely change the world. In the search for information about books, as well as other sources, he spent time until the whole morning. But as a result, drinking alcoholic beverages cursed these followers. It's still better to get silent at all, and the king of the demon forgot. Although it has passed since then for 500 years, but this is already too much, because there has been no trace of its existence. In general, I am badly looking for the fact that there is no mana and endurance in this matter, so it is not clear what to do. At that moment, the Simon was so drunk that, but he also touched him. It was because of this that he immediately fell to the ground and stuck his head down. He lay like this for some time. He continued to think about the current situation and did not understand what to do. The soul was tormented by the memories of Katarine, and the guy thought that he would really not achieve anything in this life. It turns out that still I just wanted to create a world where everyone will be equal, but nothing happened, unfortunately. While Simon was thinking about it, he suddenly heard that someone was turning from the street to him. He saw an open door on the balcony and realized that the sounds were coming from there. Therefore, I immediately went out in order to check why it was so noisy. The person who arrived was interested in how much more they would avoid them, because they will not retreat. While the young gentleman will not listen to them, these people will not go anywhere. But this was said by the head of the branch of the trade association, Alo Darren. Looking at this situation, I say, I thought that he really owes something this villain Lacan. Just an idiot because I got Hilo's ancestor. The representative of the trade association said that these people occupied 30,000 pesos last year to open the mine. But at the same time, they did not pay them. So it is not clear whether they are going to return this money at all, because he can no longer wait. Hans, fearing for the health of the master, said that he needs to rest now, but they will still find a way to return the money, so let them come another time. But the interlocutor noticed him that this would not, because they want to hear this from the young Mr. Personal. Representatives of the guy immediately missed their eyes, because they understood that such a meeting could not be allowed. Then Darren said that, judging by the reaction, no one is going to pay now, but the amount is not small. It is because of this that they have a proposal why they do not give this giant. It is not new, so even 30,000 is not worth it, and the deal is quite profitable, as if a million chance. The representative of the young master shouted in the States, and not anything will happen for. It turns out that they have only 3 giants, and then it is not clear how to protect their territories, said this was the commander, whose name is Rogers. He continued to scream that he would never allow this in life. They would take giants only through his corpse, because they are needed to protect. Hans noticed that he would behave calmer, because this would not happen, and the accountant Dixon said why they simply did not raise taxes for this time. And all 3 began to swear because they could not do this, and giants cannot be given either. Hearing this is the main one, the hero only laughed, because he understood that it was a cheerful house, after all. Lacan would be in shock if he had seen all this. Suddenly, a representative of the trade association asked people that they were talking to him to relax. Nevertheless, he really wants to pick up the giant, and the mansion wants me to be the villains to consider them to be the villains. So, pointing a finger at one of them, asked how about this. Rogers thought that we were talking about a giant, so he asked how many times he would repeat him, and the interlocutor noticed that he was probably not so understood, because he was not propaganda, but about the magic tower behind. The interlocutors were a little surprised of this because they did not expect such a deal. Then the commander said that it was better than giving a giant, and the butler noticed that no one was going there anyway. Dixon was also for, after all, she brought the spirit before a tourist place earlier, but now she is useless. Hearing about the magic tower, the protagonist immediately looked at her side, and he was definitely shocked, because he realized that it was his magic tower, and that villain Lacan built his mansion in the place of his death. The tower of the king of the demons has been standing for more than 5 years. The seaman's house was not far from this place, and there they lived with Katarina. This house was really very dirty from the old. But for the young it was not much because it belonged only to them. This place was a cozy nest in which they dreamed. The hero recalled this, but Darren continued to say that this land around the tower passed to their company, so the guy was angry and did not understand how they dare. The merchant said that people do not particularly worry, because their company will be able to turn the land into a popular tourist place. He can confidently say that this will perfectly affect the economy of the region. The interlocutors joyfully listened to all this, and Dixon asked where to sign the papers. But suddenly those present heard some strange noise and felt pressure. It turned out that it was a young master who apparently was very angry went down to earth. He shouted immediately and coldly, quite coldly, to his subordinates so that they would not go aside. And the merchant representative could not believe that he saw a guy, because it was difficult to find a meeting with him. So he asked if he had come, was negotiating with their people successfully. Already now you only need a signature to officially transfer the control of the tower to them. The gentleman immediately angrily asked him, "Do they really only talk and know how to?" Then he wondered if he had those present, what kind of place it was. It was definitely not clear to him how they dared to declare here in the general. Darren was a horror, and you do not understand what he was so angry. After all, this guy differs from the rumors that they heard. In order to explain himself, the man said that they had already entered the position, but the hero declared him to stop talking. After they get the central land, I am so far from the main estate. Thus, they will try to spread their influence in the territory and begin to attract people here, covering everything with tourism. So is he really wrong now? Speaking of this, the trade representative said that this was not true. But Seaman stood his ground, saying that they were so miserable that they could not even sell weapons, but already decided to seize the territory. And he, in turn, hates such fools, as well as people who are rotten from the inside. The representative of the trade association understood that he simply could not allow him to win, and we need to come up with the answer more abruptly. Therefore, he said that the Lacan estate was not able to pay off the debt, but they really tried to find a compromise. Therefore, their company was supposed to get at least some money. The young gentleman asked no less coldly, and who, in fact, said that they would not pay. 15 days later, but rather even after 10, they will pay everything. Then he got angry and shouted to the interlocutor to get out of his eyes. The man, along with his subordinates, was quite frightened by this power. Therefore, they began to run away from this place, and Darren finally only said that he was hoping for the Lord to hold back his word. Then the hero said how the same they are. The commander turned to him, saying that he could not believe that he said so. The guy looked at him in surprise, not understanding what was at stake. And his representatives called themselves vassals, officially stated that they were touched by his words. They are really glad that the guy immediately understood all their plans. Moreover, he was even angry to protect the dignity of the ancestor and honor of his people. Understanding what kind of nonsense these people carry, Simon asked what they were talking about. Rogers added that he could not even think that the guy was so concerned about their estate. And by the way, that merchant was already stunned from his answer to the statements, so that the man stubbornly saw in him the legacy of the ancestor of Lacan. The hero simply could not believe that he hears and thought that these were stupid villains, they pushing him again to become the king of demons more and more. A little mummy Hans asked if he could ask how the Lord was going to repay the debt. Then the young master asked the question, how many 30,000? The servant told him that you can buy 10,000 bags for this, and a whole division of giants can also be bought for this amount. At the same time, now they have not enough opportunities to borrow money from other merchants. So the guy has another decision. The protagonist said that all this certainly will not help if all this, let them just go aside. He in turn will pay the debt on his own and let them simply observe. For this, the young gentleman began to check all the reserves of the resources that were available, and they were not. Also, the amenities that were supposed to be in this estate were not found, not to mention even about food, which was also quite scarce. Realizing the whole deplorableness of the situation, the hero was horror and asked, was the king of demons was not killed here? It is just terrible and incomprehensible why there is nothing at all here. Is it really the people who represented him? Everyone stole it? Hans, in despair, noticed that it was not as incomprehensible as he could say. He, in turn, must understand everything. If he looks at the pedigree, the guy asked if he really thinks that he would be so interested. And the interlocutor has already begun his story that after the hero Lacan killed the king of demons, he received the title of Marquis and most of the territory from the south of the kingdom of Libya. Simon did not want to hear all this right away, but then he was already interested in him. The servant continued to say that then the Duke of Barak raised an uprising against the kingdom of Libya, and Count Lacan repulsed him because he could not tolerate such a lack of rights. However, the count, suffering from the curse, which the king of demons imposed on him, survived a terrible defeat. After that, the title of the count was selected, and the count was exiled to the border. It was there that he died of health problems. Now it seemed to the main character that the construction of the mansion in this territory was not a Lacan. Therefore, he noticed that the financial situation is so terrible that he does not even know how the mansion lasted all this time. It was because of this that the guy was interested in why everything happened. The servant said that his ancestors hoped that they would return honor. And it turns out that the radio is the return of honor. The ancestors of the guy would do everything. Even if I had to give all the power and money, they would like to restore its own reputation. But because of the terrible curse that the people were imposed, no matter how hard they tried, all efforts were in vain. That is how together, never shining with the achievements of the hero who saved the world, fell. The old man noticed that he was not entirely sure that the Simon remembers, but he lost consciousness for more than half a month, and this is due to the fact that he worked uninterruptedly on his reputation. He terribly wanted to prove that he possesses the qualities of a real hero, but already overdo it. And the main character listened carefully to the old man, and then rose from his seat. He drew attention to the window and said that in the current circumstances there is nothing to be done. Han said with chagrin. Even as a butler, he cannot help anything, and he is very sorry. But in turn, he is sure that there is a way out of this situation. Even if you have to give his life, he will find a way. The master said that this would not be needed because he came up with something. It turns out that they just now need to just return the money somehow. People from the estate ultimately were simply shocked by what happened. The captain, like the rest, could not believe that this really happened. And it happened that no one could even think that the Saeman would demolish the statue of the hero of the Lacan and sell it. Seeing what happened, Hans thought that the hero's statue was still here yesterday, but it was not clear where she had gone. Although now this is not so important because you need to quickly find her leg of the master. Suddenly this moment the knight turned to the butler stated that they had problems. The old man asked what happened, and they informed him that one of the knights had disappeared. The interlocutor thought that the guard was pissing at the most suitable moment for this. Understanding the severity of the situation that the butler immediately fell to his knees. And he could not understand in any way, asking what you actually planned, a young gentleman. At the same time, Seaman was driving on a cart along with that same statue. And at one moment on the way, the cabman turned to the young master. He noticed that this could sound a little rude, but whether he could ask him a question. The hero agreed to this, but asked to repeat who he was at all. The interlocutor was a little upset that he did not remember him, and noticed that his name was Philip, and he serves him a night. The question that he wanted to ask is as follows: whether he was going to sell the statue. The seaman said that it really thinks it can be melted into a good penny. Then Philip noted that it may sound quite boldly, but this statue has a long-term story. Mr. as usual drank a lot, so he was angry and asked whether this long-term story would feed him. And the knight said that in any case he could not repay with a statue only, to which he heard the words that this was only a small part of the plan. The interlocutor, of course, was glad that he comes out. He has a plan, in which case he is sure that everyone would understand him, and most importantly, pay off debts. But still he became interested in what kind of plan he came up with. Seaman said that he uses the money received from the sale of the statue in games and will earn the right amount to excitement. Philip lost his speech for a few moments and was beside himself with bewilderment. Only about the end asked, but what would happen if he only loses all the money? His words were greatly enraged, and he did not understand why he went with him if he was going to teach him, although he knew very well that he dragged him along. The knight complained if he knew what his plan would be, he would definitely not go anywhere. He asked more why they would not turn back and ask for forgiveness, and then they would come up with some new plan. Mr. Perplexed said, "Is he really an idiot? It is necessary to think carefully, because if they turn around, he will have to explain why he left with a great statue. And if they find out that the reason is that he needs money for games, he would never have forgiven for anything. It is because of this that he is sure that he will be forever expelled from the estate for this, although they will not be able to do this because he is a young lord. In this case, only the option remains when the knight is kicked out instead of him. So he told him, let him analyze the situation well and make a decision wisely, because for him it will be better. You need to think carefully if he wants to remain poor without money. Well, or will become a hero that will bring honor to the lands." Having reported all the information, the master asked Philip well to choose. The interlocutor, of course, hesitated, but said that he would continue the way. The Simone pleased it, and he said that he needed to hit his hands. The knight, in turn, was not at all enthusiastic about this situation, although he heard that the master had changed after a coma. But this is just a real devil. Very soon the guys arrived at the appointed place, which turned out to be a pier with ships. The hero finally asked if they needed to go, because he could turn around, but Philip, due to what he had heard recently, said that he needed to go forward. Thus they sat on the ship and soon announced that he was serving. And as a result, the young Mr. Mrs. with a subordinate soon ended up in the open sea. And they arrived at night, and the place of destination was the city of Lamer. Money for the hero statues was soon received, although Philip did not like the deal with the local merchant, and he scolded him for giving little money. But the young gentleman ordered him to go forward, and not swear with him. The knight said that they could get much more, to which he received an answer, that this was enough, and this place has clearly changed. Then Philip realized what he means here. Did not say this to the guy, and he said that he was not long, but before everything was different here. And I thought that then it was not so easy to get here because of Kraken, and it was abandoned lands. It is terrible to realize, but in reality 500 years have passed and everything talks about it. Further, the master said, well, after all, that they visited here. Philip was also glad of this and said that he did not know when he was the last time here, but this time everything will be exactly different. This is the second largest in the region at all of the empire, so everything is constantly changing here. Previously, it was not so easy to get to this island because of Kraken or other sea monsters. But with the development of magical engineering and weapons, This place has become many times more popular. It turns out that gambling is very developed here, but is the guy sure that everything will be in order? Then the main character said, if he had not been sure of this, he would not have come here. And when they approached the necessary building, the Simon said that he needed to go inside. The knight asked him a little to wait, because it was necessary to take a couple of deep breaths, although the heroes did not understand why he was so worried. And the interlocutor could not understand why he was so calm, because they really know how to win in these games. Smiling, the master said, when it comes to excitement, every action is important, so he knows how to do it. A little time passed, and the map was already in their oila places. But only the opponent of Simon rejoiced, saying that he again defeated him. The main character was a little embarrassed, and he was asked if he would continue to play or not. Also, the man at the table said that today luck smiled at him, and the guy was still generous. For him, it is really an honor to play with such ostentatious young master. However, a small problem has appeared because it seems that he had no chips at all, so I probably will finish this game on this. Simon immediately rejected this option and ordered Philip to exchange all the remaining money for these chips. The knight said in horror that they could not do this, because if he loses, then everything will be lost. But the master interrupted him, cried out so that he would not overcome him. The man that was clear there, Simon thought that this fool fell on his hook, and today he was lucky. And the protagonist shouted at that moment that he was ready to put all his fortune in the end. He repeated coldly and clearly that Vabank was coming. Philip, in turn, was horrified to think that the lid came to the whole family. The man asked if the guy was going to put his entire fortune, and for the first time such a large bet on his century, but the interlocutor is not the first to see. Simon reported that simply unnecessary experiences will not help the matter. This impressed the opponent, and he asked, which means that they have already approved all the cards. And then he revealed the cards that he had and gladly said that the goddess of good luck won today on his side. Then he smiled slyly and said that, unfortunately, he was forced to pick up all the chips. The main character asked not to rush and wait a second, looking at his card. It really surprises, but he has 3 cards. The man looked at this with horror, claiming that this was some kind of nonsense. Then the Simon asked him, is the whole charm of excitement not in unexpected turns because it is very interesting? Finally, Philip could accept this situation with joy and said that he believed in the master. At the same time, the opponent of the guy was angry, stating that he did not believe him. It is not clear where he got all these cards. This is probably some kind of moulage. The hero asked what he has in mind really about what was behind him. It turns out that these girls told him about his cards. The man realized that they were revealed, but did not understand how he could find out. Although for Simon, this situation was very clear, and it was only surprising that his opponent thought he would not understand anything. In this very place there are many minions of this man, and the guy knew that they secretly transferred cards. Therefore he formed a plan, and stupid was it all this situation. And in order to attach a hand to each card, he left small particles of mana. Whether he will be able to manage the cards with the help of tags then for him, as the lord of the army of the golems, to change the cards will be like nothing to do. Thus he will be able to defeat without any elaborate tricks, and therefore told the man to simply recognize his defeat. The interlocutor realized that there were already enough games today and it was time to act. Therefore he asked for the necessary people so that they taught this wine Mr. Oru by manners. The main character knew very well that such a situation would happen and said that these villains, and even 500 years later, did not change at all. He does not have as many mana as it was before, but there is a lot and does not need much against such a bug. Therefore, when they tried to attack him, he immediately applied strength in his own hand. Philip was also not going to stop aside and immediately pulled out his weapons. Then he struck several opponents just with one attack, after asking how these people generally dare to direct the sword to the only heir to the Lacan family. If they act in this way, then yes, it means only that they are ready to put on their own life. The man who played with the Simon realized that he had made an unthinkable mistake. Therefore, he shouted that he had committed a deadly sin. Philip then told him to cover his mouth, and it is not clear how he dares to touch, but the master. And the main character, depending on the situation from the side, thought it was quite good. A very small amount of time passed, and his knight was already dragging a bag of money. It was quite difficult, but it is clear that there are more than 10,000. The gentleman said that this was obvious, and thought that he considered this little boy an ordinary servant. But he really was much more talented than the guy could expect this. To all this today they have earned quite well money, but after such a commotion they will no longer be able to go into gaming houses. As a result of this, he asked his subordinate where it was still possible to earn money here, the interlocutor thought, and asked how about the arena of giants. In the past there were areas on which people fought, and the analogy is the same, because now they're sirens, where giants are fighting. Earnings depends on the match, but if you are lucky, you can earn more than 30,000 pesos. The master thought about the fact that this was interesting, because the giants were interested in him. if they act on the basis of the magic of the golems, then guessing the winner, and it would not be so difficult. Philip asked the young master to trust him, because once he was the best student of the Imperial Academy. The Seaman in this case asked him to lead him, and the guy gladly shouted that he could rely on him. Soon they heard someone beaten someone, saying that he would not go here. It was necessary to sit and not lean out. Although it is amazing, would he really begin to obey when he was scorched to death? Seeing this situation, Philip was shocked, because it was a small child. The hero immediately thought that for 500 years passed, and let the world change, but something remained the same. Something completely fell apart, and something rotted even more, like this situation. The guy was all very angry, so he wanted everything to stop. But suddenly, someone shouted from the side so that they stopped immediately, and the guards immediately looked there. It was a girl who was interested in, unless they are a royal guard who should protect the people. In this case, she cannot understand why they are mocking the child. Does it really turn out that only noble persons care about them? Simon carefully looked at this girl and was simply amazed. She continued to say that these children also have the right to defense, and the hero saw Katarina in her outline. The guard shouted that the resistance was useless, because the Count himself gave the order whether they knew how the people were rebelled because of these refugees. At the same time, the girl could not understand whether they believe that it is worth locking people in these terrible conditions. This is really nothing innocent children who just once lost their family. Whether they are accused of everything, then let them punish her first. She is not only the princess of the kingdom of the Volga, but also the same refugee. The guard was at a loss, telling her that if she continues in the same spirit, he would only afford problems. After all, they themselves do this not from a great desire, but this is just an order of the Count. Then Philip noted that the situation was becoming more serious, and the hero asked if he knew who this girl is. The interlocutor answered positively. She is quite famous in the kingdom of the Volga. She, in turn, is concerned not only to the opinion of the nobility. He does not know why, but he heard that only one ruins remained from their kingdom. He would never have thought that he would see Princess Rhine in such a place. Seaman continued to look carefully at the girl, but no less carefully listened to her name, although the reina did not suit her at all because no matter how much Katarina looked at it. Then questions appeared. Did she really reborn, but why she already looks the same? Suddenly the guard approached her and asked for forgiveness. He said that he would not allow this because if they continue, they will punish them. The princess screamed when she was used by rough physical strength, asking what they were doing. And when she was dragged, she screamed, attracting attention. Therefore, the main character immediately rushed into battle, saying that this guard removes his vile hands from her. He mercilessly beat a man who raised his hand to the girl, thinking no matter how much time had passed, even no matter how the world had changed, he would not retreat. Despite everything, these scum do not change at all as it was before. And when he was beside himself with anger, Reina ran to him and asked not to do this. She reported that he really should not go so far in his deeds. While Seaman turned his attention to her, the guard said that he was an idiot, and it is not clear how they dare to attack a guard. It seems that he was not terrible at all. At that very moment, Philip came to the rescue. He presented his sword to the enemy's neck and asked if this law is really more expensive than life. The opponent realized that he would not have any use, and leaving, he took his comrade, saying that they would still regret it. Soon the knight told the chief hero that now probably not the best time for the arena of giants, but the master did not care at all, and he rushed to the girl, called her Katarina. With obvious anxiety, he asked if the girl was injured, and he asks for forgiveness for forgetting himself, because it was necessary to help her quickly. Then the girl hesitated and asked for rotation, asked who he was at all. The hero of this was surprised, because he thought that she would recognize him. Therefore he tried to explain a little, but when the interlocutor came up, she asked not to approach. And suddenly Seaman realized that he was exactly different, so she would not know him, therefore is going to tell everything. The princess said that this is not necessary to do this at all, how he differs from those guards that are mocking the children. It seems that this Perrin was confused with someone because she is definitely not called Katarina. Philip ran up to them and asked for forgiveness for the fact that the young gentleman had noticed, and also asked that the princess should not be afraid of them. He began to explain about the situation and that the master is difficult, so that he confused her with someone. Seaman was no longer interested in these conversations at all, and he immediately loaded into thoughts. In a last life, he suffered for hours alone for hours, although he knew that Katarina would never return. And I shouted right now only because they are very similar. Suddenly a man turned to the princess, asking what she was doing here. He looked tired, and told her that they had an important matter today, so she could not even understand how long he had been looking for her. It was the butler of whose name Victor was. He realized that the girl most likely quarreled with the guards again. Although so far it was not as much interested in him as who these people are nearby, Victor said. Although this is their first meeting, He would ask for forgiveness so that they still do not approach the girl, and hopes that they will condemn her. The main character said that this is some kind of nonsense. He really did not understand everything, but he helped her. In return, he certainly does not expect anything, but is it really difficult to at least thank him? Reina was a little surprised when she heard these words from the guy, and he turned in the other direction alone and ordered Philip to go with him. Victor did not stop them and also told the young lady to leave, although the princess was really a little discouraged, because if you think about it, then she really did not thank him. The main character, along with his subordinate, naturally headed to the arena of a giant. There was just an interesting battle and not a single giant wanted to retreat in this duel. The commentator said that at such moments it is necessary to remain calm, but the situation only hesitates. And while the announcer voiced what was happening, and the hero said that it was already over, and as if he had read this situation, because soon one of the giants was really defeated. The entire arena was reported that the final blow was inflicted, and Adolf won. The crowd began to rejoice, and Philip said that the young gentleman is again on top, so they will definitely repay the debt and become rich. The main character at that moment understood that all this is quite easy, because giants act with the help of the magic of golems. He, in turn, can determine victor due to the stream of mana. Then the commentators announced that now there would be a real bloody messenger against Sting. The knight thought that the next match would also be able to predict. It is not clear how Sting could, who won 1 victory and the victim of 5 defeats, and win a savage who has 28 victories and 2 defeats. The hero said, although it is possible to win, despite such a drawback, but it seems that there will be nothing unusual in this match. And now those present asked to look at these axes. There was not a single giant that they would not cope with. This giant is the name of a double axe and Brian pilots. The subsequent was presented a successful giant named Sting. Still, luck smiled at him, but now he will have to fight the savages, piloting this option, a man named Karen. Suddenly he saw his main characters in his. The same smiled and said to Philip, so that he would put everything on Sting. The knight was beside himself in surprise, asking what he says. The savage is definitely going to win this time. But the hero, continuing to carefully look at Sting, he said that he sees a completely different winner. And now, after some time, the battle between opponents began in the arena. In the moment, commentators could not understand what was happening because Sting makes an unexpected move. He broke the expectations of his terrible defeat and literally reflects every blow of his opponent. Brian told the opponent about what he thought he was just an amateur, and he was not bad. But still, for a battle with him, this is not enough, and after these words he pushed him away. Philip was horrified by what he saw and shouted that Sting could not lose. The main character in turn did not panic, and understood that from the point of view of Mana's ceiling, this guy is in advantage, but it is not clear what they only think about. It turns out that he put, like his opponent, does not use Manu at all. The savage shouted so that Sting rose and called him a moron because he could still stand on his feet. But if he can no longer fight anymore, this will be awaited for full destruction right now. The knight with horror asked what to do because they could lose all the money. And then the savage prepared to get even with his opponent, so he was already a few meters from him. Sting, in turn, only waited for this moment waiting for him. Soon Brian still successfully struck his blow, and it would seem completed this duel. But after the dust from the blow disappeared, it became clear that there was no one at the scene. Stent used his strength and dodged the blow, jumped up, then asked if his opponent was aware that his bet can be made only in the first 30 seconds of the match. And now this very time has come out, so he is no longer going to repay for anything. Thus he applied the skill using a mana called a fiery explosion. The commentators were at a loss how this is possible because today the match is full of surprises. It turns out that their champion surpassed everyone thanks to his own skill. His name is Sting, and he is today's winner. Philip rejoiced, saying that they won, although he initially believed in this. The main character in turn was perplexity, and did he really not use magic, and this simply cannot be. The interlocutor said that if he talks about it, the top of the pilot, Sting Karen, should be a rune knight, although giants rarely use magic. Probably they hid their strength in order to increase the chances. The Simon at that moment realized that now it doesn't matter. He developed a fundamental theory regarding the use of magic in weapons, and how much time you have not passed, his method will not repeat it all at all. And this is all due to the fact that this process, which requires the use of dark magic. And together with the subordinate, the young gentleman arrived in the hangar of the Arena of Giants. The knight could not understand why they could go here. They would just go back more soon. Here the hero immediately shouted that he closed his mouth because he was busy with his thoughts, and he only interferes. And so they met the old acquaintance of Victor, who said that the girl could still change her mind. It is not clear how she could go to the match with such a giant. It was not worth it to agree to this bloodthirsty battle at all. And Reina replied that the mercenary of Andria could fight the giant of the Count. Philip also paid attention to them and said that they again stumbled upon the princess. The butler continued to ask the girl why she generally agreed to such a battle, because she would have to go out for the count if she loses, and such a decision could not be made hastily. The interlocutor replied that she had already considered everything well. If I refused, then many refugees would just die of hunger. In this way, in order to save others, she found only one departure from this situation. The old man could not believe it, because she is so easy to sacrifice her own future. To all this, the giant is simply falling apart and it is obvious that they will lose. The princess so strongly wants to protect refugees, but how about her life doesn't he think about himself at all? Simon, he did not want to listen to this whole conversation, so he told Philip that he had to go. He has already finished everything he wanted to see here, so you can find it back. On the way, I thought that this was really not Katerina, so you should not get involved in it. And suddenly he heard someone else's voice, who said that the princess simply distributes himself to the right and left. The count is one of those who would not stop at the way to his own goal. He had threatened refugees before. If it does not, then the refugees definitely nothing will help. To all this, if you do not change the magic stone in the option, then it will definitely be uncontrollable. Although something can turn out, but the difference in technical characteristics compared to the graph of Monarch will be too large to give worthy resistance. Therefore, the girls just need to listen to her butler. Reyna understood this, but simply could not give up. She knows that if she just loses, she didn't even try, then who else can stand up for the weak? And suddenly I heard Seaman, who approached her and asked if she could look. The voice seemed quite familiar, so she drew attention back. Having evaluated a little situation, the hero said that the magic stone and giant can still be used. And suddenly the princess was defended by Victor, who grabbed the weapon. He was a guard of the statement that such a coincidence could not be most likely. These are killers, subsidized by the count itself. While the hero was angry, Philip asked to lower the weapon, because in front of them the Duc de Lacan is the 15th descendant of the Lacan family and the current lord. Victor asked what a hero is not clear why they would believe. What if the princess stepped forward and told the butler to move away and then asked for forgiveness for what happened earlier? It seems that the guy heard their conversation, and she is ashamed to recognize, but there is no way out at all. Is it really possible then she would like to ask him for help? Simon unexpectedly agreed and noticed that now it was necessary to make sure that this time he was not mistaken. And for this he is going to show his skills. And when he went inside, the recent interlocutor of the princess turned to her. He noticed that some passerby with the renovation of the giant could not cope. The person next to him added, "It is not for nothing that the giant specialists are called steel magicians. This person will only do worse because these nobles think that the most intelligent." Then Philip approached them and asked if they really wanted to argue. He is ready to put a whole 1,000 pesos that their young gentleman will easily fix the giant with whom they could not figure out. The repairman did not understand why they would agree, the knight said, in which case they could refuse if they were afraid. And while he did not discount, Rhine asked if he could ask a question. Pointing to the weapon of the Simon, which he held in his hands, she asked if they were really using such a tool when repairing giants. Philip carefully looked and understood that he was definitely not used. And then he saw how the young master immediately cut his hand. That's why he began to panic and asked what he was doing. The hero realized that these people could not understand, so he said simply to observe. He released his blood and, when using magic, directed it to the giant's body, so his core, which fed all this huge colossus, began to interact. And after a little time performed by manipulations, the hero ordered the giant to rebel. Soon his magic tower was in front of the seaman. He was in his old body and slowly made his way through the battlefield. And when he got to one of the fallen Gulemov thought, did he really end here? But there was little time to think, so he turned to immortal creatures, to those who lead enemies to hell. Using his own dark magic, he asked them to answer his call again. And surprisingly, even after so many years, Golem still answered. And the stone creature, which all this time was without life, came to life again. Like the life of a giant shone, who was trying to restore the main character. He was completely in working condition, and Philip was glad that the young master coped. While he rejoiced, he did not say that he believed in him. The repairman realized that this was incredible. The princess was also joyful because he really succeeded, and the giant the world moves again, but as possible, it is incomprehensible. Victor could not believe that he managed to revive the dead magic crystal because he had never heard of the existence of such magic. The whole continent, or maybe even the whole world, will be struck by such a historical event. The knight told the young duke that he knows absolutely everything he would believe, even if he says that he is able to recreate the golem of stones. Suddenly, one of the repairmen cried out that this was probably some kind of trick. It turns out that that guy painted a magic circle with blood, and this is a real dark magic. Hearing this, Philip was beside himself with anger, asking if they really blamed the only heir to the Lacan family of using dark magic. The interlocutor simply noted here how not to look. Everything is formed into a single picture. Then, in order to explain the situation, The hero said that he would explain how everything is actually. This is a particularly secret technique of the Lacan family, which has been stored for 500 years. The repairman asked for regrets that these were still for secret techniques. Reina noted that it doesn't matter now. If it is dark magic, then the guy saved hundreds of lives. She does not even know how to repay him, so she simply expressed great gratitude. She would like to apologize for all this earlier. Simon noted that all these are trifles, although he is not surprised that she did not understand everything. Suddenly the interlocutor approached and processing his wound. She said that she was offended, so she asks to allow me to make amends. The gentleman said if it still became easier for her, then okay. And while they spoke among themselves, he ran to them to some person saying that they had big problems. Victor asked in surprise what he was about here. The guy said that he had already been searched everywhere, and this person was not in the waiting room either. He speaks of the pilot of Andrea, who disappeared without a trace. In county at this time, they discussed that they were able to lure Andrea, so that the princess now does not have a pilot. It seems they somehow managed to fix their giant. The count asked, but was the giant was working? The interlocutor noted that it was not so impossible to fix him, and only he tried to explain himself to how the Lord hid him, claiming that he hates his apologies. This man made a mistake and there is no forgiveness to him, but he still tried to explain himself. The Count of Monarch in turn was unavailable, sending him away. He also said that he was dismissed, and when he did it, he asked if the rest had nothing else to happen. Still, he should not allow another outcome of events until Princess Rhine belongs to him. Looking at his giant, he said that soon everyone will find out who Mr. Monarch is actually. And now not much time passed, but the same duel had to go on the battlefield. The announcer announced that the giant world of Princess Reina would fight against Achilles, but it seems that there is a rather clear difference between them. The great Achilles, Count Monarch, a real champion, he has 78 victories and not a single defeat. Now they will see that the world has prepared against the eternal victorious. But there is a problem. The world is not visible anywhere, so there is a chance that he decided not to come at the last moment. This was very angry with the audience, and they shouted that if he was frightened and fled, then they need to return the money to them. The Count, because of this in turn, only rejoiced and decided that they surrendered because there was no pilot. It was still better than the Rhine. It would calmly come up for him, and he was going to show how to defeat his honor. A little earlier there was a conversation between the princess and her subordinates. Andrea was nowhere, and it seems it was the intrigues of Count Monarch. Victor could not believe that Andrea could really betray them, because he was a faithful vassal. The interlocutor told him that some even saw how he left the Count. The butler could not believe it. He did not lure their pilots so, and between their giants, a clear difference in strength. It is terrible that Andrea fell so low, and here the victory is far from a single force. After hearing all this, the hero asked if he understood correctly. If they did not perform, then the princess would have to marry him. Moreover, if they do not mind, then he thinks that he can help them all. Reina asked, but how should he do this? Does Lord Luke know how to fight? Then Philip remarked to the young master that of course he believes in him, but did he forget what the last time he tried to manage the giant? Simon smiled and asked not to worry, because it is easy to manage the giant. And now, the audience was surprised in the arena. The commentator said that they already thought the world would not come to the duel. But he was already entering the arena right in front of them, and did not run away, as they thought from the real winner, on the contrary. Seeing this, the Count was beside himself with anger, and told his subordinate that he said that the pilot was no longer. He replied that he was completely sure that they were not. The man could not believe that she really hired someone, although this is impossible. I am sure that he does not even understand the importance of this match. It is amazing that someone went so far as to take the side of the princess. Victor, along with the girl, also rushed to the match and rejoiced that they were late. Reina noticed that she, of course, was happy, but whether they would definitely succeed. There is a huge obvious difference between the giants. The enemy is the champion from the land of Lamer. And when the Simon arrived, who said that everything would be in order, he added that Philip may look as usual, uncomplicated. But despite everything, he is very smart. The guy just managed the giant and could not understand why the young gentleman did this to him. The commentator continued to say that the giant of the world, from which everyone was waiting for the escape, arrived on time. But a completely clear difference is visible between the opponents. Moreover, against the world, the invincible champion of Achilles, the audience was at a loss. Would they really fight? Suddenly they began to laugh, saying that it would be better if he simply escaped. This piece of shit was called a giant, and it is not clear whether it can at least move. The Achilles pilot said that he applauds standing that this person did not run away. However, he should be aware that he carries this match, and he is not going to regret him. Philip only coldly replied that time would tell who would be the winner. The opponent immediately rushed to the attack and said that in this case they would now check his self-confidence. The knight successfully dodged and realized that, as expected, his strength was proportional to the size. However, everything is not so simple because he would need to add dexterity. Therefore, Philip quickly turned into a counterattack and said, although he is large and strong, but this does not mean that to stay good. And suddenly the guy right in front of him saw another incision. What was very surprised enough because I realized that the opponent was also very fast. Achilles really quickly approached him and waved his weapon, but the world managed to dodge again. The opponent noticed that the guy nevertheless dodged his blow and his self. Confidence without thorough. Although he understood that it was really dangerous and his deeds were bad, because the pilot, with whom he clearly fights at the expert level. The commentators were joyful from such a fight. Achilles continued to apply crushing blows towards the world. But Philip in turn was quite dexterous and constantly dodged from them. The audience before the start of the fight thought that this match would be fast, but the world dodges literally from every blow. Victor, watching what was happening, was surprised, and said that it was impossible to run away forever. Then the princess in a whisper asked him not to worry about Luke, said that Philip was very strong, so he needed to trust him. And the main character, of course, heard them, and thought that the guy was faced with many knights, so a clearly skilled fighter. However, even so, he will have to teach a lot yet because it is not clear what he does. Philip continued to run away and dodge the blows, thinking whether the opponent does not get tired at all. So this case will have to strike an unexpected blow in his direction, and when he did this, a little lull happened, so the guy thought it really worked. Achilles a moment later asked, did he really finally decided to fight normally? In this case, he is going to show the opponent what he is capable of. The commentators rejoiced, saying that it was final and the champion's move, but whether the world could dodge this is interesting. Philip in turn understood the power of this blow, so he realized that he had a lid. And the blow happened quite powerful, so the dust rose by tens of meters. But it turned out that the guys still managed to get away from this blow, and it was incredible. The Achilles pilot was a little bewilderment, because he was not far enough to dodge. Philip said, Uncle Rogers would have nailed him if he had found out. But what else remains he must defeat, because the young master believes in him. Therefore, he promised that the enemy would regret this moment until the end of his days, and he really regrets that he forced him to show all his own strength. The opponent noted that his aura at a young age was large. A hunch immediately appeared, and it seems he finally met a suitable enemy. Then the Count got in touch and asked what he was doing. He was angry, asking if the pilot cannot cope with such a loser, and knows very well what will happen if he loses. Suborders immediately apologized that he was disappointing the aristocrat, and then he reported that they would immediately show worthy resistance to his opponent. In order to do this, he quickly rushed to the attack and said that they would leave an honest duel the next day. Philip noted that he, of course, is a pity, but he simply does not have time for another battle. The enemy, in turn, did not perceive his words seriously, continued his attack, inflicting a crushing blow. Achilles did not understand where the world has not disappeared. But suddenly he felt that he was struck and found out that the aura and the speed of his opponent had changed. Then one interesting moment was remembered, because the world disappeared 3 years ago. But at the same time, the invincible legend of the giant arena was a ghostly swordsman of black chivalry. Commentators shockedly reported that this amazing turn of the events, Achilles was disabled in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, for all the victories present in the arena, the world won. And now the crowd finally began to joyfully greet the winner, shouting his name. Achilles said that he did not even think that he was meeting a Black Knight again. Then Philip asked if he really knew him. The interlocutor said that they fought with him in the royal arena 3 years ago. He broke all kinds of records, and it is interesting what he forgot here. The knight noted, if it really considers him a Black Knight, then he should help those in need. Then he asked to keep his personality secret from everyone. The opponent said that he would do this and still quit. After the victory, Victor rejoiced that they managed to win, and the girl, trying to calm him down, could not understand why he was crying from such a joyful event. The hero in turn looked at her and thought that now was enough. Finally, he can leave here with a calm soul. And on the way, I decided no matter how much he scrolled in my head, the excitement is also about investments. If you look at the bookmakers, then the chances of the world were 20-1-1. And Simon put all 10,000 that he recently earned. And then how can it be easy to make money in this world? As a result, the last large calculations and all earnings by the hero managed to earn as much as 210,000 pesos. After a short period of time, he went to the pier along with his subordinates. There was a princess there, and he said that it was time for them to leave. Reina could not express her gratitude for everything that they did to them. The master said that she may not worry about it at all, because they helped her just as they could. The interlocutor noted that they had a hard enough, and she would like to thank them properly for it. The hero noted that all this trifles. He thinks that they had already thanked them enough. If they had not met with them, then they would never have earned such big money. Honestly, I would like to stay here longer, but they hated the noise, so it would be better to leave as soon as possible until his personality was revealed. After listening to this, the princess said that now she understands everything, and hopes that she did not complicate their life. The guy again asked not to worry too much for them, and yet it would be better for them to leave back as soon as possible. If the Count really conceived something, then he will not give up so simply. So the Simon really thinks that he is already considering his next plan. Victor drew attention to the fact that all this must be left until Count Monarch detained them. The hero said that he perfectly understands that the girl was worried about refugees, but even having left everyone here, she will definitely not be able to help. It is because of this, at least for its future, it will be better to take a step back. Reina smiled and said that she was in the know, but for her it will be very difficult. She in turn may seem very stubborn, but she cannot just leave her people so simply, while she wants to help as many people as possible. After hearing her boyfriend, he smiled and said that she was clear to her, and then asked her to protect herself. For this, the interlocutor thanked him, saying that he hopes they would get calmly. They still managed to figure out what a big problem, and I can only return to their native land. On the path of the ship, Philip asked, "They say the master. Why he took these fools? It was necessary to dilute them for money." He spoke of those mechanics who tried to repose the world. The hero asked, unless subordinates did not say that they had almost no good magicians in the field of giants. In this case, it is not clear how they will manage giants without good specialists. The knight noted that the young master himself could fix them. Simon called him a fool and said that he knew this, how to independently restore and fix my check stone. It turns out that he was not just in the lowest position. Therefore, let him cover his mouth and simply protect their belongings. There was just a fairly stressed atmosphere in the county of County. The butler did not understand why the merchants were taking their belongings from them, because he thought that they still have time. And the trading representative who did this asked what things he believed when they promised to repay the whole duty. And they, in turn, betrayed their own people and fled in the middle of the night. So the man does not fulfill with what fright he still should wait. Suddenly, Philip approached him from the back and introduced himself that he was a representative of the young master. The merchant was a little surprised and immediately asked where the master himself was. The knight did not want to answer this ridiculous question and said that he just needed to convey something. And then he opened the box which was in his hands, and there was a whole mountain of gold coins. Darren could not believe his own eyes because even a whole week has not passed. But it turns out that the Duke has already earned 30 pesos, and this is surprising, and also means that this man cannot occupy the territory. Philip shouted and subordinate immediately to you to load the wagon faster because Lord Darren is busy. The merchant was embarrassed and said that it is not necessary to rush like that. He wants to get everything personally from the Lord. Simon also read such an outcome of events, so a piece of paper was prepared. Philip said if he thinks about how to take the next step, then there is already a news from a young master. It turns out that they returned the debt, so that it is legally considered an offender, and it is necessary to prepare better if he is going to stay here. According to the 39th point of 36 laws of the Empire that states that noble persons whose territory were crossed without permission, they have the right to execute that violator. So if the merchant does not want to lose his head, then let him go better. This is exactly what the Mr. Epistle was, and he also added that Darren has 3 seconds for this. The interlocutor with their people gathered very quickly and soon left only in the end, saying that these people would still regret it. Philip thought that they at least understand that the young master should be afraid, although he himself understands this perfectly. And now the butler, along with the others, turned to Philip. He thought that they would be thanked, so he asked him to be happy for what happened. But suddenly he saw the wrong reaction that he expected. After all, several angry men fled in his direction, who shouted that they did not understand how he dared to sell the statue of the master. The captain tried to ask where the hatch was, and let not say that something was shaking with him. Then the knight asked for a second to explain. Rogers interrupted him, saying that he stopped inventing excuses and answered honestly. The subordinate agreed to this and immediately told everything that he was asked. At the same time, the main character was heading to the tower of the King of Demons. He opened the huge door and entered the room, which no one had been part of it for a long time. And when I did it, I realized that the place was completely abandoned, but it is logical. He is sure that in all this time that has passed, no one even followed the tower. But even so, it is necessary to rejoice that at least it still costs after that a lot of time. The places that he saw inside were quite familiar to the heart in the heart. One of them was the very place of his last joint memory with Katarina, and he in turn is going to protect him even no matter what. But it will be a little later because now there is a very important task. Approaching the desired place, the guy hoped that it was still working. Their great happiness for him, the big door opened, although he knew that everything was working thanks to the ingenuity of the yard. Even after so much time, the door opened without any problems. And now it's just the time to pick up what belongs to the guy. The best way to cope with the curse with which he ran into accumulating more mana than the curse is in himself. Seaman has heard this advice for a long time, but now this is really the only solution. Going to the next of the door, he applied his own strength and tried to open it. She, in turn, succumbed to him quite easily, and the guy entered there and realized that the last time was here 500 years ago. It is pleasing, of course, the fact that everything in these places has been perfectly preserved. The hero even likes that it became much quieter here. Then he looked at the flask. He greeted the demon Horit, saying that they had not seen him for a long time. As many as 5 centuries ago, a fairly interesting event occurred in the territory of demons. The main character, using his dark forces, arrived there and fought with demons. There he used one of his most deadly spells called a deadly bullet. And a little time after the battles, he arrived in one of the rooms. There he saw a little girl and asked if she really ruled this place. The stranger said that she had heard. He had already captured several fortresses. And she thought that he was an old man with an 8th circle. She praised her Hawa, and she was a supreme demon. The interlocutor continued to be surprised that he was not an old man, so she was a bit disappointed. Although even so, for a person this is quite impressive, she is touched by his efforts, so that mercy will show. Thus he can ask about anything condescending with her. And the girl, of course, will certainly satisfy his curiosity. The hero of such a pathos was useless, and he said that she was the most talkative supreme demon that he had met. And then he asked the question that the rank is really increasing when it talks a lot. Horit was angry with these words. She called him a fool and stated that she showed mercy, and he rejected him. It turns out that he struck a couple not among the demons and decided about himself all that. She's going to show him that here demons are not even nearby with those with whom he fought before. Simon immediately called on his golems and asked her not to worry, because he was not so far to fight alone. The supreme demon did not attach much importance to a stone creature, thinking that they would easily cope with them. And the bloody battle between the demons and the adherents of the king of the demons was soon begun. At first, Horit very easily coped with all the golems that they attacked her. And in the end, only she remained on the battlefield along with the seamen. Without thinking twice, they smiled at each other and immediately asked for an attack. And according to the results of this battle, Seaman won. The supreme demon asked what he was going to do, turning it into demonic energy. She was wondering if he really wanted to change the world, or that the hero coldly noted that she did not need to know about it. Then he immediately ordered her to be reborn into demonic energy, and this happened. Remembering what was before, the hero realized that cope with her was much harder than the rest. If you collect demonic energy incorrectly, then you can be captured by rage. And he in turn saw people who turned into truly terrible creatures. Then the risks were high, but in the end he learned the right method to safely absorb the demon's energy. Simon reached the 9th circle, so he was no longer useful to him, but still did not think that it would be useful to him after 500 years. And now the guy swallowed that very demonic energy and felt something strange in his body. The pain saturated all its limbs and consciousness, immediately clouded. After a moment he was in some strange place, and when he examined him more closely, you realize that this is the kingdom of consciousness. It seems that still he was not absorbed by the demonic energy that he swallowed. Suddenly he looked forward. He noticed some silhouette and realized that it was a Horit. The girl also felt his energy when he arrived here and looked at him. Rising to her feet, she angrily asked who he was. Simon immediately realized that it would be difficult for him to stand with such a body that he has now. A really huge amount of time has passed, and it is all with the same strong demonic energy as before. The hero looked at her and said that he had come to borrow her demonic power. The interlocutor heard his speech, immediately realized who he was. Therefore, immediately approached him and grabbed his throat, shouted that he was now a weakness. She in turn almost recognized him. It is so incomprehensible what brought him here now. The hero noted that he told her a second ago that he had come to lend her strength. The supreme demon decided because of this and asked if he was sure that this was possible. Indeed, with such a fragile body that he has now, it will be difficult. Horit was glad that the enemy who imprisoned her here for centuries appeared in such a miserable state. To all this, he desired her strength, so does it seem like it is just ridiculous. The main character was in an unprofitable position at that moment, and felt that the girl would turn his neck like that. But everything was not so simple, and he asked if this was embarrassed. The interlocutor was surprised at him. Then the Simon added that he came to her with a good offer. So does she really take it like this and just throw him out of here? At that moment he understood that she needed his body as a source of energy. Therefore the girl would not dare to injure him. Suddenly she asked what kind of offer. And then finally let go of his neck and said that she respects courage, although her gaze remained furious, and she asked if he really thinks that she could withstand all her strength, especially with the destroyed magical circle that has. The hero said, if he could not, then let his body take. She has been sticking out for several centuries, so there is simply no point in refusing. The supreme demon said that it was curious, especially if there is no more solution. While we stick out here, it will frolic with him as much as he wants, so he really thinks that he will take so much time. Simon was again in a bad position, thinking, did she really control his consciousness and his body? At the same time, the demon did not stop pestering him, not understanding that he really has time for thought. And soon he lost consciousness from ordinary control is so incomprehensible where his pride went. Seaman in turn only smiled from this and said that she was as noisy as always. Horit said that he only chatting and maybe, is it really true that he has as many mana as before? The hero even reported with a destroyed magical circle, and at all without strength everything is not so simple. Then the girl found that he disappeared, as if without a trace. But he was here, saying that he had reached the 9th circle with the help of dark magic, and will never fall into the trap of reason. Thus, now the guy controlled the situation and tried to slam the demon. Soon Horit realized that this was only an illusion, but not to occupy the guy's strength. Therefore, she immediately smiled and said that she had guessed that this would happen. He is really very funny and still did not think that she would reach the 9th circle. A smile appeared on Simon's face and he asked what happened. Doesn't she really believe him, so you need to show in practice? The Supreme Demon noticed that this is not necessary. She only wanted to say that even with such a level he could not change the world. The guy interrupted her, stating that it was definitely not all over. In the end, he really, as before, is going to change the world. Horit did not understand at all exactly where he was going to direct her strength. But it became interesting whether the guy would have reached the 9th circle of power again, to which she received a firm, positive answer. Therefore, she said, as usual, at least the confidence of him. And she, if his body is inhabited, will only be able to reach up to the 6th or 7th circle. So I weighed everything. She decided to leave the world to leave him. The girl's body immediately turned into the demonic energy from which she consisted. The hero at the same time began to absorb her, and said that he would have to work hard so as not to disappoint her. Horit noticed that this was really so, asked if he would fail this time. After a short period of time, the Simon finally returned to consciousness. Although he was very exhausted, but finally he gained great power. And in order to check it, the first thing he used the skill of a dark flame, and immediately realized that this was the 3rd circle. Nevertheless, well, that he wanted to lay down again, so this is more than enough. Maybe the fact is that it is pure demonic energy, but the color is very different. Well, if Horit wanted to, it could easily capture his body, and he wants to live up to her expectations. The guys already know the theory for each circle, so getting to the 9th will not be difficult. But in order to collect demonic energy to the required level, you will have to work. Only because of this, you need to start acting immediately. So he directed his own power to another gate and easily discovered them. Then he went inside and said that they had been sitting idle for 500 years, so it's time to get to work. The next step was to call for those creatures with whom the guy spoke, so he made a call using magic circles. As a result of this action, many golems appeared, which were supposed to help the Simon. Somewhere at the same time, the residence of the Count Monarch was restless. One of the subordinates was beaten and received a fist right in the face. The aristocrat asked Milan whether he was in the know in what he was guilty of. He asked for forgiveness for losing. The Lord said that he misunderstood everything. Because of what other match? How much he does not think about it. Everything seems to him that there was a huge difference between the giants, and the defeat happened so crushing, so anyone will think that this guy conspired with the Reina. In response to these accusations, the pilot shouted that he swore fidelity to him and would never have done this in his life. He swears the honor of a real knight. The Count smiled and asked if the honor of a real knight is all that he could say in his defense. Next to the guilty of that moment, there was already an executioner who was ready to cut his head. Milan realized that he was not to do, so he immediately shouted that he knew something about their pilot. 3 years ago, he collided with him in the Imperial arena, and this guy was known for not a single defeat on his account. The gentleman asked if he knew him, who he really was. The guy said that that man disappeared so quickly at that moment that his personality was never disclosed. And when the Count stood out clearly all the information, he noticed that, apparently, the guy Moore, nothing to say, and again received, lined up near him. Milan at the last moment asked for the mercy of the master and said that he would find him at all costs. But it was too late, and his head flew. When the aristocrat left the room, another subordinate noticed that Princess Rhine remained in Lamer. It seems that she does everything for the sake of refugees. Monarch was angry because of this and soon said they looked after her, and also after a small pause asked to find a pilot who controlled the world. The Count must find out where he lives, and this person is also required to see this person. Moreover, to find out if he can accidentally interfere with their planes. Lamer lands have long been flourished thanks to fertile lands and a nearby river. However, many people left, leaving their own houses to be empty. There are already as many as 3 villages that were recently busy in the balance of disappearance. This was said by the main character who asked a person nearby that he thinks about this problem. And next to him was a man who managed the finances of the duchy. He was connected and begged the master for mercy. Not understanding what he wants like this to do with him, Simon asked not to build a fool out of himself, because he was not to blame for this. Dixon continued to stand his ground, stating that he could not do anything about it, and he honestly worked with all his might. "My lord," after these words he waved his own weapons, frightening the man. And then he added, "I would like to hang him in the middle of the square, but the more he finds out about him, the more interesting it becomes. He is a fairly talented person who is recognized by the Empire, but at the same time he refused other estates and came here. Seaman requested accounting records that have been recorded over the past 10 years. This was done to see how things were, and he provided everything during the day. So the man is really a fairly useful employee." Dixon gained confidence and said that he was really well versed in arithmetic, so he could boast. "He can solve any equations only in his head." The hero said that this is the whole problem. The interlocutor was wary, not understanding what was at stake. The main character did not answer him on this and only grabbed him down. In the meantime, the accountant rolled down, as if a football ball he was heading behind him. The man landed down and, coming a little consciousness, asked why he was doing this. And suddenly he realized in which place he was there were a lot of poor people and very dirty houses. Dixon could not believe that they were the inhabitants of the county. After all, this simply cannot be when he did the calculations of such slums. Seaman just asked him what to personally look at how ordinary people live here. Human lives cannot be adjusted to ordinary formulas, and you need to spend time with people to understand what state the county is really now. If a man cannot find out the reason, then he will definitely not work here anymore. Hearing these words, Dixon asked if he really wanted to fire him. The guy only smiled sweetly, asking, did he really want to quit? But at that moment, the Purified already went to people, stating that he was an accountant of the Lacan estate. Sayamon thought that he could simply observe how the lands were destroyed, but for this, there is better time. He, in turn, is simply obliged to improve this place in order to become stronger. In the estate itself, Philip was interrogated. Did Mr. really return debts with gambling? The guy could not help but answer honestly, so he told everything as it was. The workers immediately began to whisper that it was really true he solved problems with excitement, and the reputation of the estate could then fall if people recognize. The knight was asked why he did not stop him, because they built a reputation for so long, and he destroyed everything at a time. The Commander Rogers joined the conversation, addressing his subordinate. He asked, no one by chance did not recognize their master. Philip said that really, no one recognized him because he was not so stupid. And suddenly he remembered how he himself said to several people, how they dare to raise a weapon against the only heir to the Lacan estate. Having found out his mistake, he muttered that perhaps someone knew him. But this did not happen in the gaming house, so there was nothing to be afraid of. Hans said that this problem, even if they learned about him, not in the casino. Given the power of Count Monarch, this is just time. He is the head of the land of Lamer, so that any news comes to him, given his evil nature. To all this, he is quite capable of starting his own revenge, and in this case, they will not be able to do anything, because he is distant relatives of the Emperor. And Rogers added that the Count expands the territory with the help of wars, and they only gave him a reason to cut this confrontation. It is completely incomprehensible what, in fact, the Dark Gentleman was thinking about when he did all this. And so he just appeared behind them and shouted that it was simply impossible to listen. He asked where those who talked about the importance of their reputation. Do they really need to ignore the atrocities what is happening in front of their eyes? The commander noted that they simply think more realistic. Their army compared to the army of Count Monarch is nothing. They wanted the guy to understand that his decision put the estate in a difficult position. The young gentleman immediately asked if they really received the title of the hero, licking the boots of the nobility. So didn't they get their title for the courage to take a step towards justice even when everything goes against? The butler answer said that people here give everything for the sake of an estate so incomprehensible why he says. Then Seaman asked if problems were resolved in this way. After all, they have real problems, and they mutter something about the casino. The old man shouted that all this was not jokes. There are people to find out that they returned the debt with the help of gambling. The reputation of the estate would fall. The master was even more angry, and he asked if a good reputation will solve the problem of hunger in all the county. They must protect people in residence of county and simply leave because of the impossibility of living in such hellish conditions. They in turn think about reputation, and this is just some kind of nonsense. Therefore, Seaman called them idiots and said that he would no longer endure such behavior from now on. Everything will be different, and if anyone remains, does not agree with his orders, and let him leave, because everyone who is not ready to comply with his orders is simply dismissed. Hans was horrified by these words and shouted that all the people here served the scenes for many years. The hero did not understand why they could not understand him and said that he did not like narrow-minded ones, so he was going to show them his determination. To do this, he turned to Philip and said that he worked well and turned out to be a good captain. The guy was a little embarrassed and noticed that he would not say that it was so. And the hero continues his speech, added that only a real captain is suitable for the leader of the knights. It is interesting what Rogers himself think about this. He asked what he wants to say with this. The master said that everything is easier than they might think, because the one who will win a duel and will become the leader of the knights. Philip cried out with horror that he would never succeed because this is his uncle, and he taught him to keep his sword. Then the captain asked him to be a little quieter and said that he understood everything. After all, he still did not have the opportunity to show them what he was capable of. The protagonist said that he is as good as in words. And soon the rivals were on the battlefield, discussing that they had not fought alone for a long time. For several years it had passed, and to fight somehow awkwardly. Philip noted that he was going to show everything that he learned over time. Rogers also prepared for the battle and said that it should be fun. After a few moments, the time came to start the battle. Simon looked from the side, and it seemed to him that Philip was very worried. Interesting, is Rogers so strong? In the past, the guy saw many knights, so he sees that his subordinate is not of the weak. And then the knight just rushed to the attack and using the skill of a ghostly sword. At the same time, the captain easily reflected this blow and said that Philip had become stronger, and his skills are already much better than before. The guy immediately prepared for a further decrease and noticed that it was already completely different. So after a moment, his blade swept near the head of the interlocutor. The man was surprising, and he realized that it seems the guy did not really joke when he talked about this. He moved so quickly that he left only ghostly silhouettes after he was here a second ago. And waiting for the right moment, the guy had to inflict his critical blow. But even despite the enormous speed of the opponent, the captain saw everything. He smiled and said that the young master had not just praised him, and then successfully grabbed him by the clothes of counterattack at the same time. And he threw to the ground, declared to become a swordsman standing on the defense of the family. He would have to practice a little more. Philip from this attack suffered quite seriously, feeling severe pain in the case. And his opponent stops and was not going to at the same time inflicted several strokes yet. The guy landed again to the ground and was a little old. He was very angry. The excitement from the battle, as usual, flashed in his eyes, and he shouted that he had not finished yet. Although a moment later I saw the opponent's weapon right in front of my face. He presented a sword to his neck and said that he was thinking a duel on this can be finished. Philip realized that he was unlikely to get out of this situation, so she said that he was presented. He felt his victory. Rogers turned to the young master and asked if it was enough to prove that he deserves the title of commander. He smiled back to this and said that he was impressive. And after a while he had already watched the knights training. The subordinates to the captain was breathing heavily, and he said that they were not so much run to breathe so hard. Moreover, the young master checks their training, so you need to run faster. The hero, at the same time, told Philip that he did not think that he would lose so quickly. He noted that Uncle Rogers is included in the top 5 best swordsmen of the entire continent. Seaman realized that it came out if such a person had to die on him, and then he reported that he was going to choose him with his own personal knight. That is why he hopes that he will be able to dignily fulfill his own obligations. Philip could not believe these words speak, but was very happy. So he said that he would try even stronger and become his defender. The master noticed that in this case he joined the training as soon as possible. Further, he thought about the fact that 10 out of 50 knights are considered experts. He thinks that for this, it is worthwhile to thank their genealogy warriors. The point is not only in Philip, but also in Rogers itself. They have talents that many warriors dream of. In this case, it is clear why the family is in this state. Soon the butler asked what the young master planned. First, he sold the statue, and now he also sells family treasures. Is it really going to get rid of everything from the honor that Lacan's family has? The protagonist said in response to this, if it brings money, then he is going to do it. The Hans did not delight these words at all, because he did not understand why the young master was doing all this. Simon looked at him and saw anger in the face of the old man. And he simply said that the warrior de Lacan, who died 500 years ago, will now help them at all. The interlocutor again could not understand how he could say. The master asked to just think. The land reached such a deplorable state solely because they hold on to old principles and endlessly honor the hero. Already now, from the honor of their surname, nothing left them for people like him. Hans said that this could not be, if not for the curse of the king of demons, then everything would be the other way around. To convince him, the hero asked to think they praise his ancestor for good luck and blame the king of demons in failures. The guy is going to be honest with them and surpasses the great warrior de Lacan. And if the interlocutor is going to hold on to old principles, then they are not on the way, and he will erase him in the history of the whole family. After these words, the seaman immediately left the office. The servants ran to the butler and asked if everything was in order with him, and he just thought about what he remembers the day when he read the book to the young master, holding him on his knees. So now he simply cannot believe that he has changed so much. And the gentleman constantly visits the tower of the king of demons, and only one explanation of this situation. The old man is sure that all the work of the very curse of the very curse. Philip just arrived at the Simon and turned to him. He asked if he could at least once listen to Hans because he was somehow too cruel. The Duke of these words only smiled and said that he was considering the opposite. He is not going to give time for thought and will not allow to give the back. Although they will talk about this a little later. But now it is interesting whether he fulfilled the task that he entrusted with him. Philip noted that he still speaks too loudly. He barely managed to get at least some information from Hans. The master asked him to speak, and he all asked him to speak quieter. And soon he spoke about the very person whom they had to find out about. And also went to the dungeon where they held the right person. Simon said that his subordinates described everything differently, because this person looks dead. Then the subordinate stated that this was not so, because yesterday he was alive. Suddenly chains stirred, and the one who was sitting in the dungeon asked who they were. The main character immediately felt strong pressure and realized that this is the fifth circle, no less. Although how not to see this person can even be stronger. The old man continued to repeat everything so that they would not force him to repeat, and answered who they were. Simon said that he had heard the interesting news that he already seems to be here for a long time, but he was all right. The interlocutor who heard a voice could not believe that this is the one he was thinking about. The gentleman was interested in why the only iron magician wrought in such a place. The subordinate asked him why he came to such a place. Is it really because of him? Simon did not understand that he really thinks that he would stand aside while someone is loafing on his territory. He heard that the old man arranged a complete hunger strike and is interesting, so Li Hans locked him here. The interlocutor noted that the master lost consciousness due to the case with the giant that occurred by his carelessness, so he is ready to atone for the guilt at the cost of his life. Simon asked if he really thinks that his life is so expensive, and in general it has long been proven that this did not happen through his fault. At the same time, the interlocutor continued to blame himself and said if he had only studied more and more thoroughly, then this would not have happened. This is fully his fault, so he asks to simply punish himself. The hero thought that he was well aware. He is very true, but he is too persistent. Although there is nothing to do with it, so he said, since he wants it all right. Then he asked Philip to bring the sword, and he asked with horror what he had in mind. The old man is already prepared for the fact that his verdict would be executed and simply expected this moment. And the Simon said that he begged him, so he was going to teach him a lesson. For all this, he stated that you did not even think to resist this. Then he immediately waved the weapons and chains that were constrained by the river, were destroyed. Then the Iron Wizard asked the young master what was the meaning. Seaman said that he was completely unprofitable to kill the old man, and he would not tolerate such a loss. And he will simply work like a horse, and ultimately understands that it was better to die. His main burden to serve the guy until the end of his days, so let him worship his honor and keep this moment in his heart forever. Having made this speech, the guy asked Philip to get what he dragged. A few seconds later, a lot of gold coins fell out of the wizard before the eyes of the wizard. Then he was very surprised and asked the young master, where did he get so much money? The Duke noticed that there are not so many, but exactly about 70,000. It is necessary that the interlocutor use this money and restore the magic tower. Let him buy the necessary magic books and all the necessary equipment for the repair of giants. The gentleman plans to invest in magic, so let him make sure that such an incident never repeat himself again. The man could not believe it, and stated that he had delivered a lot of problems, so he was not sure that he had the right to receive so much condescension to his direction. Simon again asked him that he was generally carrying, probably he did not understand, but this is his punishment. You can only decorate a little because he is not going to just forgive him. And only after these words the old man immediately understood everything. Therefore he immediately bowed, stating that he, as an iron magician of the Lacan family, begs to devote the rest of his days. It will be without grown obvious to atone for all his own perfect sins. Philip felt a stream of mana, who came from this man and was very surprised. And Simon thought about the fact that he did not know how to adapt to the situation at all. But such stubbornness would definitely come in handy in these difficult times. Then he said that there are 2 free people in their estate, so he leaves them on him. The butler, at the same time, carefully watched what the young gentleman was doing, and when the guy managed to convince Mutt, he was very surprised. This, of course, is really amazing, but the old man still cannot get rid of obsessive anxiety inside. And since then a month has passed, the knights were trained as usual. At the same time, Hans did not get rid of his obsessive anxiety, although he felt that the estate had changed a lot. Philip is once far from labor. Now he trains more diligent than ever, and anyone else. They think that he was hiding with shame for the mistakes of his own past. Now he teaches future magicians. Thoughts about the old man were interrupted by another person who greeted, and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. It turned out that it was an accountant of Dixon, who had disappeared all this time somewhere. He said that he was also very happy to see everyone. To understand the situation, Hans asked where he was all this time, because the entire estate is the top with the bottom, and for his loss. The interlocutor asked for forgiveness for making him worried, and it was a really long story. He also thinks that it will be better to show everything that happened clearly. And when the butler saw this, he could not believe his eyes and asked how it was possible. The place where they arrived were recent slums, And now they flourished. Dixon said that he could not shock him so much, so that he needs to go to the market in the distance. Now anyone can freely sell their own goods, and this was decided together with all residents. Now everyone is discussing how to improve their lands, but the traditions who have become aged are simply getting rid of. With a joyful smile, the accountant asked if it seems to me that the patrimony finally looks like it should. The butler understood that it remains only to agree with this, because it was true. But even so, it is impossible to deny the fact that everything that is happening is completely contrary to the principles of the estate. Roger saw the alarm in the person of Hans, and noticed that he had the same experiences as he had now. But he released the situation because the Lord brought significant changes, so he nothing to say. And now he has the time for training, so he asks to forgive him. He thinks that their main duty will now trust the young master. After these words, the commander immediately left, because he was really waiting for a training session. And the butler left alone with his thoughts and thought that in such a short time, everyone crossed to his side. A week later, he came to the Duke and said that he had laid out all the documents that he had asked. At the same time, Simon apologized for filling him with work, but still he was counting on him. The old man continued to say that Delane regarding the cabinet he would allow tomorrow, and if something else appears, let him know. The main character immediately after these words said that Hans had incorrect priorities. Their patrimony is full of people who have nowhere to hide from the rain. That's why now you need to think about them first. The butler in turn thought about what the Lord recognizes better. All the more he understands that it is better to simply comply with his orders. However, despite everything, he just needs to understand what his true intentions he has. Therefore, at night he decided to follow the young master, making his way through the forest. Hans knew very well that he was going somewhere every night. To all this, quite often looks at the tower of the King of Demons. I would not even want to assume this, but if he is captured by the curse of the King of Demons, it will be just terrible. Suddenly the Simon stopped, and this immediately alerted the old man, he thought. Did he really notice him? In turn, several people came to meet with the Duke. The butler was very surprised when he saw them, and the hero asked if they figured out what he entrusted to them. The interlocutors replied that they easily coped with this easier than taking a lollipop from a baby. Hans could not believe his eyes, because he understood that these were the bandits who were expelled from their lands for robberies. It turns out that all this time they were hidden in these places, and there are quite a lot of them. The hero continued to say that they really quickly managed, and he liked this approach. That's why he further invited them to start what they planned. The bandits asked what he had in a bag of any pleasant gifts for them. The guy noted that this is so, of course, if they were ready. In response to this, the interlocutor said that he would not worry. They carefully comprehend the book that he gave them. The butler table is very interesting why the young master gave the bandits a book. It is also very bad that he does not hear anything at all, and the interest that the young master has planned everything increases. At the same time, the bandits continued to say that, thanks to him, they learned to read and write. He carefully explained everything to him, so that they figured it out even in the most difficult parts. And now we are very grateful to him for everything that he does for them. Thanks to the young Duke, now even their children know how to read. And thanks to food and medicines that he brought the wife of one of the men, he can finally go again. These people sincerely thanked Simon for their help, and this was visible through their eyes. The guy smiled in response to gratitude and said that he was really glad to help. But at the same time, everything has its own price, so he thinks that they are finally ready. One of the thugs said that he was a few years bandits, but not some ungrateful animals. That's why let him only give his order, and they will do everything he wishes. The master said that this was just fine, and immediately poured out everything that was in his bag. Hans saw that there were gold coins, and there are definitely more than 10,000 of them, as well as books. The bandits asked what these books could still understand. But why did they need money? Then Simon said that in response to this question, they would just understand as soon as they read it all. It turned out that the records were information on registration at the place of residence and moving. The gentleman said that these were documents recognizing them by the official residents of his territory. With them, they will have the right to call this land to his own. The guy will build a town nearby so they can live there. People could not believe it because they are simple bandits that the horde even overcame. It turns out that they are already immensely grateful to him for his help, and made so many things that they simply cannot accept such a gift. The man nearby agreed, because they did not have the right to accept a gift, although they simply steal from others in order to survive. Let them be very grateful. They simply will not be able to accept them for the residents. Simon said that he was in the know about this, and at the same time also does not accept them to the end, even if they had no other choice of robbery, a serious crime. But he also cannot forgive the fact that the conditions of his lands put them in such a position. Let them steal but did not hurt anyone, so the guy believes that they can still atone for their guilt. This money that lies in front of them is half the annual board, And from now on, all the bandits that are in front of him will become his mercenaries. Because if they really forced everyone to be afraid of everyone, then let them be ready to die in the defense of the estates. This is precisely the path of atonement that he chose for them. So it turns out, here is such a future he can offer them. However, the path that these people will choose depend only on themselves. The young master is really not easy, so trusts everyone. The interlocutors were flattered by such an attitude towards themselves and immediately said that they would devote to life, to protect its territories. At that moment, Hans thought that bandits from their lands were always considered objects for enslavement. Such were the rule of the family de Lacan. Now even the old man was interested in whether he believed all this time. Indeed, it becomes terrible that he chose to ignore the cries of alienated. And he is simply a fool who thought about the young master superfluous and began to doubt him. Only now he understands that the young duke wants to improve their land. So now Hans promised that he would never make such a mistake again and will serve faithfully. The main character, in turn, all the time knew that this old man was watching him, and finally he weakened vigilance. All these observations, of course, annoyed him a bit. Soon the guy said goodbye to the bandits with whom he talked cute so sweetly. He headed in an unknown direction, and the butler continued to observe him. Soon a guy finally stopped and could exhale with relief. He understood that all this was quite difficult, but he thinks that he figured out the majority. And now probably it's time to start the main thing. Therefore he headed for the tower of the king of the demon, where he was already pleased that he was doing his golems, but the problem is in price. He managed to get the confidence of the people, but this road was worth, and spent most of the accumulations of the estate. The fact that now you already need to find some stable source of income. That is why most likely you will have to turn to this. Then he drew the attention of all his golems to himself and asked if they would help him. And after the action that he committed, the whole tower of the King of Demons was lit by purple light. After some time, Philip came to the young master and stated that they had already spent almost 210,000 pesos from the savings. But the guy knew this, because this would still not be enough for the proper management of the territories. Then the knight asked what they should do now. Seaman was not interested in this, but only that he brought reports on the mine regarding this. Philip said that there were only unsuccessful attempts a couple of years ago. They tried to inspect their territory, but did not find anything at all. The hero did not understand why, then they took such a huge debt for the sake of a useless venture. When the interlocutor said that at that time it was the only way out of the situation, due to the terrible combination of circumstances, it was in terrible condition when the inhabitants of the estate left. The master was just unconscious. The seaman said, "It turns out that they had to literally grab onto the last flimsy straw, and now I realize that the year turned out to be indistinguishable, so it was impossible to even maintain the territory. But still something is wrong, because there should be a mine." And having closely examined the card, he asked why there were no records. Philip said that this is a mountain ridge of Rocha. To scout the area was too difficult, but because of the abundance of monsters. They sent their warriors there several times, and monsters are teeming on each corner, so they had to return from time to time. The gentleman realized that this region was obtained. It was not possible to explore. Looking at him, the knight immediately said that he had not said that he had strange plans on his mind. And he saw a crazy smile on his face, shouted that it was very dangerous there, if he was going to go there, then even if he did not do this himself. The main character perfectly understood that she should be there, and soon he was already on this mountain ridge. At the same time, it became clear that Philip's wretch really introduced his rights, and he thought he was exaggerating. But it turned out the opposite, and right now in front of the Simon there are many monsters. Although the guy realized that it was really strange. All these monsters should live in different regions, so why they united incomprehensible. He only hoped that they were all not used to showdowns with people. Creatures did not want to take, listen, and did not understand a person, so they rushed to the attack. Although the hero was trained enough to easily dodge, at the same time the situation was not so simple, because then it was attacked by less creatures from different sides. The young duke did not panic at all and called them villains, because they think that they are so strong. And now the time has come in order to deal with all of them. Of course, his subordinates should help him with this, so he applied dark magic. Immediately from a magical call, stone golems appeared that attacked creatures. Naturally, they do not occupy their strengths, so they had to quickly cope. Enemy monsters did not understand this and tried to resist them, although of course any attacks had nothing to do with a stone from stone. Retristaki Golema could only easily cope with the opponent with the help of one blow. The main character rejoiced, seeing what was happening now, because everything is going much better than he expected. He knew that magic stones were erased with all these creatures, although even despite the fact that they quickly lost, they existed. Seaman in turn continued to rejoice that everything works out well. But there is a small problem that there are more and more enemy creatures, and now it is clear why the knights did not succeed. It will be really quite difficult to deal with all of them. However, despite all the difficulties, nothing is impossible. And now the guy drew attention to the creature that was different from everyone. Judging by his aura, he is a leader. Having found out, the main character decided that he would also fight with everyone, so immediately changed the skill of physical strengthening. When she did this, it very quickly disappeared from the place where he had just been. And he ended up right behind the enemy leader, saying that he did not have so much time. Then, touching his head, he immediately applied the skill of submission. The monster's consciousness was immediately blurred, and it became clear that everything worked out. This very skill was as if you were a straight hand of brains, who subjugates the caster. The rest of the monsters looked at their own leader with surprise. After all, a magical mark appeared on his head. Seaman smiled immediately and said, "It seems that their leader is now his servant." It seems that luck turned with their back to him. The creatures were immediately demoralized from this, and did not understand whether it was necessary to fight. The main character, after he saw their reaction, he said not to be afraid. He is not going to touch them if they bring his leaders there. And after a short period of time in the hands of the guy, there was already a leader of goblins. And the rest of the monsters simply stood near him and expected that they lived on. Suddenly, Simon turned his attention to them and said that there is a question. He, in turn, heard that somewhere there is the monastery of the dwarfs like that, whether they know something about it. Goblins looked at him in surprise and could not answer anything. From this, the guy was really a little disappointed, but he knew that the monsters were so empty-headed. Suddenly, he heard the leader of Goblin turn to him, began the fatherly language, declaring that he does not worry because he leads the master where he needs to. The guy really liked it and asked to take where to take it, so soon they were near the cave littered with stones. Seaman asked if this was really departure, to which he received a positive answer. Seeing the picture in front of him, he realized that there was a landslide, but still something is wrong here. In particular, the reaction of the monsters was strange that were near him. They were literally shaking with fear, even despite their size, so it became interesting why the monsters were so scared. At the same time, the young gentleman did not know what, in fact, was the matter, but decided to find out as soon as he entered. To make it quickly, he took advantage of the skill of Dark Flame. The destructive power of which was different in its immense strength and stone, were soon destroyed. When the dust fell after the explosion, the hero saw the entrance and was glad that there was a mine. But creatures in turn still continued to tremble with fear. Then the master turned to him and stated that they could go back. And also let them never touch people and live quietly, without doing anything without the order of the master. Finally, his new subordinates were delighted and swollen in allegiance with gestures. In the meantime, they ran away. Seaman thought that one day he would be useful to him. But it will be, of course, later, and now is the time to start what he has planned. In the past, people had incredible technologies and non-polar strength at the same time, and only due to this they exceeded strongly other races. They wanted only people to remain on the continent without any monsters. Simon, known as the King of Demons, began to burn one kingdom after another. Of course, for other times it was incredible to look at such a picture, because for them this person was literally a savior. The meeting with monsters and heroes, as usual, held a demon king in the tower. Once, to rub what with one of the monsters, he noticed that he had not even 10 survivors. Therefore, she told the subordinate to provide them with the base in another territory and let them begin construction. The leader of the tribe was immensely grateful, the master, for this. Then Seaman asked if there was someone else to meet. If not, he would already like to relax. But suddenly the old man entered the room and stated that he was the last. It was a yard that noticed, is it possible to force an elderly man to wait so much? The butler king of the demons was terrified of this and already wanted to attack him, but the master stopped him. He could not believe that the dwarf was a representative of the Earth's race, possessing the best technologies, came here. In addition, strong energy comes from him. The seaman became interested in this and noticed that he did not even dream of meeting the oldest dwarf here. The old man said that he was quite insightful, and in appearance you can't even say about him at once. The king of demons became interested in why he came here. He would not believe that even people are even. The interlocutor noted that people lack technology, and they are also destroyed by nature. They have already destroyed many ecosystems. Simon noticed, based on his words, does he really want to say that he will help him get rid of them? The old man smiled, saying that he correctly understood. If he got rid of them, they will help him improve his tower. The guy then said that he is also a man, and he still intends to help him. The interlocutor made it laugh even more. He did not understand what he was saying. After all, it turns out that it is he who is the king of demons. The hero recalled everything that was and made his way to the cave. He thought that the dwarf said that there was a huge mine and did not seem to lie. In this case, the guy thinks that she has long been abandoned, but well preserved. Still, this race really has incredible abilities. There is a huge amount of ore. There are people and people will agree to work in the mine. Then their patrimony will have nothing to worry about. What if something strange was in the way that attracted attention? The path that the rails offered was littered with some kind of design that overlapped it. The hero realized that after his death, people took this place, and perhaps this is the case. A lot of valuable things are scattered here, and maybe the courtesuit were very excited, but they would never have left what they are valued. So from which side not to look at this situation here is definitely wrong. Suddenly he felt someone's presence and immediately paid attention back. The body of a sufficiently large monster appeared there, which appeared from the ground. Now you have become clear to the former king of the demons what really happened here, and why the monsters would like so much. After all, right in front of him was now the owner of the mine, a huge worm. It turns out that because of this, the scoundrel was abandoned, but he is not in place here. So the guy decided that he needed to drive him away and rushed to the attack. After a few moments, several golems appeared. The worm was a little surprised. He saw the approach of stone creatures to himself, but he realized that the battle would be long. So he screamed very much and prepared to fight. At the same time, Seaman was also not going to stay away and ordered his subordinates to attack. That's why their bloody battle soon began. The worm, stretching his body, headed forward and the golem stopped him. But at the same time, he did not leave his attempts to get to a person. The main character realized that he would have to intervene in this battle and prepared to use his strong skill. Then he jumped forward to attack from an unsaturated place. And as before, he decided to use New Dark Flame, which stood out with its destructive power. The explosion that the monster took over was really very strong, and this attack apparently certainly had to pacify him. But when the dust sank after the explosion, the hero was very surprised. Of course, he is aware that his magic became weaker, but it is not clear why he cannot even leave the slightest scratch. And the creature at that moment realized that the person was in an unprofitable position, so that breaking through, she went to him. And after a few moments, the guy's body should have been absorbed by him. But it wasn't there to defend as usual, but the stone gumble rushed. He grabbed a large worm and immediately threw it down. The hero immediately praised his subordinate for doing everything right. But the enemy creature was already naked, and it was ready to continue the battle. Simon understood this and found out that the attack would not be as simple as it was before. Therefore, he screamed his golem to be careful, but it was too late because he was already attacked, printing in the ground. And he was just such a rapid attack for such a rapid attack, which very much surprised the former king of the demons, because he realized that the attack of the worm was simply strong. And suddenly his attention was attracted by what the monster is doing. And he got to the minerals that were scattered around the cave and began to absorb them. And at that moment, the fact that when the embodiment of all these stones it becomes stronger, became obvious, so that it will now be much more difficult to fight with him. Fighting further, the guy could not understand where such a creature could only come from. What skill he used, no damage goes away, and he has no other choice. If he wants to defeat this worm, then it is necessary to use a giant. But as soon as he tried to get to the exit, he was immediately littered. The young duke realized that it really turns out that the creature was smart and closed the passage. And the worm, in turn, was preparing to continue your battle. At the same time, Simon stopped to think about the decision and found out that he was stronger than he thought. At the same time, it turns out that if such a large monster paced outside, then he had to leave traces through the forest. So there is a high probability that it lives only in mines. In this case, it makes no sense to bring a giant here because it simply will not accommodate. This complicates all. If only the guy knew his weaknesses, he would not suffer so much. And suddenly his attention was attracted by what his golems do, and they touched his head. At the moment when the minerals were attacked by the stream of mana interrupted, so that there should be the whole secret. That's why he asked his subordinates to win him a little time. And if the guy is not mistaken, then there should be something nearby. But now the question is, where is he that he is so desperately looking for? And suddenly he really found what was needed, and this is an ancient kurka, a very necessary tool in the mine. Well, now he had a chance to win, and he used physical strengthening. And he did this in order to quickly get to the head of the worm on which there were a lot of minerals that fed him. With this weapon, the Simon was confident in himself, because he understood that he was capable of anything. After this pathos statement, he immediately hit the main mineral on his head. When this happened, the worm screamed strongly and began to wriggle to the sides. The hero realized that he had made a mistake, and probably did not use strength. As a result of this, he, like the creature nearby, fell to the ground. At that time, a conversation took place in the estate of the duchy. Philip was interested in whether he knew that the young master was disappearing every night. The guy mumbled that he often disappears without warning. Then the commander called him an idiot, because the lord's personal knight did not know where his master was even. In his defense, the knight shouted that every time he was trying to follow him, he somehow disappeared from the field of view. Residents say that he often goes into the tower of the king of demons. Roger said that he was not in the know, so he did not think. But now he understands why Hans was so worried. And suddenly, someone who was not told just came and said that he was no longer worried about, because there was no reason. He decided to completely trust the young master and really believes that their lord does everything for his people. The protagonist at that time continued the battle and thought, maybe before it did not make sense, but now everything is different. He again took advantage of the skill called the Shadow Flame and decided that he would kill the creature. And after his attack, the golem was caught because he almost fell. The attack was even stronger than the last time, but with another such monster, the guy thought that he could not cope. Although thanks to this gut, it will be possible to maintain a lot of effort. Golem soon began to remove minerals with the head of a defeated worm. And the Simon walked around the mine and examining it and suddenly noticed something. Under the wall, the remains of the dwarf continued to be under the wall, and he had quite rare artifacts and part of the equipment. It seems that the race tried to defend herself and preserve what they built. The guy buried him and hoped that this was enough. He hoped that now peace would come, so let them leave his burden. And hoping the courtesy will understand that even if he took their things, this does not mean that he has evil intentions. After some time, Dixon was informed that they found a mine, which shocked him. Roger said that he did not look like it, but she was teeming with Franks, although they found absolutely no traces of monsters. The accountant said that it is fine now, they will be able to solve all financial problems, and the wizard found out that it would be necessary to engage in preparing tools for the mine. But then the butler said that the mine would not need in such a good condition that someone had already worked in it. Given this, they will be able to put together a good condition if they simply find enough workers. Simon carefully listened to this whole conversation, and it was like the fact that almost everything was ready. He overtook the monsters higher into the mountains in case the battle was untied. If there is a need and there will not be enough troops on the territory, they will still be useful to them. While the young duke was thinking about this, the butler turned to him. He thanked the guy for the fact that all this was only thanks to him. Simon noted that all these are trifles because everyone worked well enough. And finally, with all their might, they were able to make ends meet. If everyone does not want to return to the previous order of things, it is better not to relax, because if you loosen the grip for a minute, then everything will fall apart again. After that, he said that there is another important assignment, and he asked if he could temporarily leave the patrimony on them. The first thing he heard the question of where he was going, so he stated that they could ask Philip about details. He smiled and stated that the young master was going to buy a giant, and he was going to escort him. The commander interrupted the guy, saying that the hero may not worry. He would take responsibility and accompany the master so that nothing to shake off. Then Dixon also spoke, who said that if giants were involved in the case, then he should do this, because the financials were talking about, and this conversation continued for a long time. And after all the disputes, the gentleman still went on a carriage, which was ruled by Rogers. Philip was very happy, saying that he could get a locomotor giant dream so much. Simon did not understand his joy, because they have their own giants on the territory. The interlocutor noted that this sounds depressingly new models, significantly different from this garbage. The pilot should control the real advanced model to completely control the situation. Suddenly Rogers interrupted him and stated that he was already enough to chat Ankend. Let him stop these useless philosophies. Even if they don't dream of such a nonsense, when he was nearby, the knight did not understand why he was so evil. And at the same time, the commander again viciously stated that he would close his mouth. If he had not been the main knight of escort, he would sit in the place of the coachman. At this time, the seaman thought well that he took Rogers with him. He could shut up Philip in time. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by the noise of the train that rushed forward, and he rushed not along the paths, but along the way in the direction of the carriage. The protagonist looked in surprise and asked what it was, and the captain apologized for such a quick breaking, because a road train took from nowhere. The master was surprised from this, did not say what he saw for the first time. In order to explain, the captain said this is a large wagon moving magical engineering. It is very expensive to build such a thing, but it is many times more powerful than the carriage, so I often use it to transport heavy cargo. Suddenly a man came out of a roadway and asked people if everything was in order with her. Judging by their very surprised expression, they first see a road train. This was said by a middle-aged man, and there were 2 huge guards around him. Rogers was immediately a little alert and asked who they were. The stranger jumped onto the shoulders of the healthy man and said that they are merchants from a large company. They travel around the lands and sell local delicacies. Simon was surprised and said that for the first time he hears about them. In response to it, he heard that it was not surprising, because they began not so long ago. But their company will soon achieve success, even if they only observe. By the way, the master looks quite familiar. So there is a high probability that he is some kind of lord. The main character could not understand what this is suddenly, and the question, because he sees them for the first time. The interlocutor said that he has nothing in mind at all, because they are a kind of businessman. It's great, because to build relationships with major lords. Thus he wanted to know to me whether he is some famous lord. Then Simon said that he was still a lord, but not so well-known family that it could somehow interest them. The merchant immediately laughed and noticed. It seemed that he crossed the boundaries of the permitted, given how routine places, or for him, he probably did not notice how he pressed. The guy turned around and said that they were doing things, so they were forced to say goodbye. The interlocutor said that it was nice to talk to them. And soon the carriage, along with the seaman, rushed further. But the so-called merchant Teisel checked everything properly. He found out that this guy is exactly the lord of the lake and family. He thought that he would have to go in his ground for the sake of this meeting. We were lucky with him right here. Now it seems that the situation has become much simpler. On the street I was staring, so the seaman stopped with his subordinates. Philip began the conversation that the people whom they met during the day were not at all like merchants. The captain noticed that the usual trading company thought could not buy such a trailer in the same way. That guy Teisel is very suspicious, and people next to him were also not like merchants. The hero of the Wikrasta did not interfere and only listened. But he realized that this is not all that they did not notice, because the load in their trailer was radiated by a weak stream of mana. Even the dense fabric is not able to hide a unique magical trace, so the matter is completely difficult. The thoughts of Simon and the rest were interrupted by the sound of a breaking branch coming from the darkness. Philip was immediately alert and asked who he was. Surprisingly, it was a recent acquaintance who wished a good evening and stated that it seems that the accident brought them again. Simon immediately stated that they all rode in the opposite direction from them. What then brought them here, interestingly? The merchant said that they did not finish one thing, and on the way back, he noticed the light in the fire. In this case, they are not against if he joins them. The young duke immediately stated that he was not against it at all, but whether everyone would suit everyone, did not know. He looked much further than this man stood, and I saw there still people, stating that I was not sure that the place is enough, given how many people he sees. Then Teisel said that he looked at him high, but he was really a real lord. Quickly, this respected master grabs everything. Nothing personal on his own account. He does not need to accept. This is just a business, and the hour of this venerable has come. Then he ordered his subordinates to kill them all, especially the bright young lord. The captain was the first to accept the battle and told Philip to defend the master. The guy said that he would do this, and at the same time could not see that these villains dared to attack the Lacan family. He asked the seaman to hide behind, and they would protect him. The main character at that moment realized that there are too many enemies, and the scale is too large for the usual planned murder. In addition, if you look at the skills, they are good, clearly beaten off the blows of Rogers and Philip. And if this battle is delayed, they will lose. Suddenly, the striker was behind him. Rogers immediately arrived in defense, stating how he dares to lift the sword against him. And after this statement, he easily beat off the blow and threw the attacker. After asking the young master, everything is superfluous in order, and he replied that everything was fine. Simon continued to think that these guys are not just killers or bandits, given that they are able to defeat Rogers and get to him. So we can conclude that this is a well-trained knight. The so-called merchant was a little surprised that they were fighting badly, and then he ordered to attack them already with someone else. They will probably be better to give up now because a huge giant was put right in front of them. Simon immediately made sure that his feeling was true, because he felt him recently. The situation was really critical, so he screamed Philip and Rogers to close his eyes. They did not even ask why this was needed and obsolete his order. Then the guy used the next skill and santed the sun to break the silence and shone through the darkness. They accumulated quite a lot of energy. He immediately applied the skill, which was called the flash. Bright light immediately spread to hundreds of meters, blinding all people. They did not see anything at all. They were randomly tried to wave their weapons. At the same time, the young gentleman turned to his subordinates and said that it was necessary to run faster. While they did this, Teisel realized what was happening and shouted that it was impossible to let them escape, so let them run faster after them. The subordinates said that with their eyes the problem, but the main thing was not disturbed by this. And the thugs said that they were not at all warned that he could use mine. Teisel continued to be very angry and said that he would catch everyone and torture to death. The main character, along with the rest, continued on top. They praised him for acting in time, and it was cool, so the young gentleman, as always, was incredible. Who would have thought that he had a talent for magic, and this is most surprising. Philip remarked to his uncle that their master would definitely become an excellent chronic knight. The hero shouted at the same time, if they really have enough strength to chat, then let them run as soon as possible. Do they really think that these people will just leave them? He thought, it's good that they set up the camp in the forest, just in case. And if you were around the plains, they would have been caught a long time ago. Now a dark night, so it will not be so easy to track them, and you need to run away as far as possible now. Only the guy thought about it, as he heard the voice that he was approaching him. And these were the very enemy killers who overtook them, and were not going to let them run away. As a result, they immediately blocked the path, and the master along with the subordinates had to stop. He could not understand how they went around them so quickly, so he said that plans were collapsing. The wards immediately informed the young master to continue to run away, because the killers are now even less than half. Simon asked us if they would cope. After all, it seems that these killers are quite strong. Then, smiling, Philip asked the question that he really does not believe in them, because they have not yet shown everything they are capable of. The commander noted that it was true that he asks for forgiveness, but it is difficult to give it to the fullest nearby the young duke. Simon realized what they mean and said that it was logical. And then he noticed that he would obey, and they were already leaving. Philip prepared for the battle and said that now everything would be different. He immediately rushed to the attack, rapidly struck the victim with the help of a ghostly sword. And of course he said that now it is time to show his real skills in battle. Rogers also added that these people dared to touch their master. So he made a swift attack, killed 2 victims, and said that they would not even think about mercy now. It turns out that the mercenaries decided to send their swords against the knights of the Lacan family. In this case, they need to understand that they will have to pay enough for this. While this furious battle was held in another part of the continent, a terrible tragedy happened. On the streets, fire glowed and people tried to extinguish the fire, although even water did not help them. Victor shouted to the princess that it was not just a flame to be a feeling that they poured oil, so it is very dangerous here, so you need to leave. Reina panicked and said that she would not do this because she could not just run away and leave people here. They heard her words and shouted that they would definitely not leave without her, so let the first run. The butler and her faithful defender decided that he had to act, so he took her hand and said that he needed to run for the sake of people. The girl succumbed to his manipulation and at that moment only looked at the city, which at the same time continued to burn even more and was not going to fade away. When the fire leaned down, it was a little subsided. People returned to see the consequences. Someone with horror discovered their close relatives, who were already dead for a long time, and someone tried to find them in the houses that were destroyed. Earlier it was terribly painful to look after everything that was happening, and she said that she was terribly sorry. Suddenly, a familiar voice had heard that he said that they had not seen each other for a long time. It turned out that this man was Count Monac, who stated that he trained nearby. So was it so that they had met? The girl asked what other training is such a time, for which the interlocutor noted recently he had been especially engaged in the discipline of the soldiers. Now they conduct night exercises in order to ensure the safety of citizens day and night. Victor shouted that he was a wretch and did not understand where he learned to lie so. The subordinates of the nobleman immediately sent a weapon at him, and the count himself turned to the princess and asked, "Didn't he tell her any more? Now we themselves only complicate everything for our own people, so they will live in misfortune until the end of their days." After these words he began to laugh even more and left. Reina could not say anything to him, and only continued to cry, and also thought that she would not forgive him for anything. Simon continued to run away from the massacre and realized that it seemed that he had fought off the fact that Rogers and Philip detained the attackers. "A guy, I still don't know who is behind these people, and they even have a giant. We need to return and start preparations for the upcoming war." He fled quite briskly, but soon established, because he saw something strange in front. There was the same so-called merchant, along with several giants and killers. He said that he did not go too much, although it is not worth hiding that he also underestimated the young lord, and it turns out a draw between them. Who would have thought that the heir to the hero will slide to so sorry for magic? Smiling, the seaman asked if his magicians did not appeal to him. But even if they really do not like her, let them just see how they went far. And it turns out that they did it just to catch some simple guy. Teisel then said that even a lion must be understood on the full when it chases a rabbit. The main character, having heard these words, only laughed in his face, declaring that they divided him with his knights, thinking that they could drive him into a corner. At the same time, the man could not understand why this guy is so calm. Is it now for this? That is, in order to find out everything, he asked if he was asked or just the roof went. If he tries to win, then everything is in vain. Simon noted that they still need to see what he is capable of, and only then will they be able to truly understand that no one to get out of here alive. Then he took advantage of the artifact, which was in his hand and was preserved in the dimension. After a few moments, a stone hand appeared from this magic measurement. The guy continued to say that he had not shown anything to them in common. At the same time, Golemov continued to appear more and more. Seeing their mercenaries, they asked with horror where they came from. It was difficult to call on one, and here there is such a large number. The leader told his subordinates that they behaved calmly, and thought about that. This villain could dodge. Golems were terrible only in the past. There are a lot of them, but these are just dumb stone blocks. Do not forget that they have giants, and they are several times stronger, and one such even a dozen golems will not be even. Anyone who brings the head of the young lord will become a commander on you. So let the subordinates show everything they are capable of. Already these words of the mercenaries were encouraged, and they immediately stated it would be better to restrain his word. Then they immediately rushed to the attack, and white fear simply disappeared. Simon noticed that this was stupid cruelty, and how they could only take his immortal army for a bunch of stones. 500 years have passed since those moments for about a year. They fought and thinks, it is worth teaching these wretches a lesson. To do this, he took advantage of the manipulation skill and controlled the golems as puppets. As a result, they were on different sides, surrounding those who tried to attack. The killers were surprised because this speed struck them. They did not even have time to notice how they were surrounded in an instant. Teisel shouted that it was not just idiots and it was just ordinary, exposed to not understanding what they were so disturbed. The main character with a smile on his face noticed that they should not be so underestimated, because otherwise they will regret it somewhere in the afterlife. After these words, he immediately continued to use the skill of manipulation. And the way he moved, it was exactly reflected on Mount Mach, which he used. In order to show his strength, the hero immediately hit the ground. As a result, the blow turned out to be strong and destructive, so that hit the enemies. They were surprised from what happened to the ground, but he really completely controls the golems. Then Simon told this fighter who fought in 100 battles that he could give him advice. The basis of any military strategy is the intelligence of the territory. The enemy leader realized what was happening, and it turns out, he specially aims into the ground. But this cannot be. Then the land under the mercenaries began to crumble, and they decided to retreat. But the former king of the demons said that he had warned them. They believed in themselves because of some giant there. This is exactly what destroyed them, so it will be necessary to consider the whole situation after death. At the same time, the golems continued to attack, and even the giant began to fall with Tizzle. Since the earth failed, they fell down and seemed to have no chance of surviving. The hero in turn stood on the edge and looked down, thought about whether everything ended. Indeed, what pity it was necessary to catch a couple of these guys and find out who was behind everything. At the time of his thought, he did not even notice how he was struck. It was a cut with a weapon that fell on the guy's shoulder and cut it to the blood. He really could not expect this and realized that someone else was alive. And then he saw that the giant, along with the enemy leader, rose up. The man called the guy a villain and asked how he dares to touch his knights. He would never forgive him. In response to this, the young master said that this is possible for the better. He would catch him and force him in everything to admit. The interlocutor was even more angry, and he said, let him try to do this if he could. And he is so simple, he will not beat him either. It will only do this that the situation if he beg him for mercy. Since he's going to force him to suffer, after these pathos words, he immediately rushed to the attack. At that moment, all this infuriated, and he tried to use the dark flame. But at that moment, he did not work out and felt some strange sensation. It soon became clear that the situation was bad, because the magic got out of control. The heart at the same time as if it explodes inside him, and it is not clear what needs to be done with it. Teisel saw his condition but did not stop, and only was more delighted, claiming that if he had a mana, then he was an end. Let him begin to pray for mercy right now, and he will tear him to pieces. The hero noted that this annoys him even more, especially this noise. Does the enemy think that with such a curse, he will not be able to cope with him? At that moment, the guy took advantage of the dark energy, which immediately attacked Tizzle. When he saw this, he was very surprised, asking what kind of damn thing it was. Is it really dark magic? After all, this simply could not happen. A descendant of the hero uses such a vile power. Then Simon said until his patience ended better, let him say who sent him. The interlocutor, of course, did not want to answer. And then the dark limbs began to squeeze his neck. The enemy immediately realized that his life was in danger, so he shouted that he would tell everything. Those who sent them were the Count of Monarch, and these are all his orders. This is all that he knows, so he asks for mercy. The hero looked at him coldly and asked what other mercy, and Teisel continued to beg that he only once forgive him. But Simon was not going to do this and simply finished it off, saying that he had not forgiven his enemies. Then he immediately returned all the force that was released out, declaring whether demons or people are absorbed, forces are still not the most pleasant process. Next, the guy thought about the Count and how he was a trifle, but he acts. He sent knights, as well as killers, and even a giant. So much effort was spent in order to kill only one person. Is there really any special reason why he pursues the Lacan family? Nevertheless, be that as it may, he promises Count Monarch that he will definitely pay for everything. While he was walking and thinking about it, he heard some rustle in the bushes. But it turned out that it was just Philip, who had been looking for a young master all this time. He looked at him and the captain, and noticed that they arrived faster than he expected. The subordinates were really glad that he was in perfect order. Simon noticed that it could not be otherwise, because it was not clear who they take him for. It is necessary to go quickly, because they have already spent a lot of time. On the way, Simon said that the Count is behind everything, although he is not entirely sure, but it is better not to appear on the territory of Lamer yet. Then Rogers noticed the young master that it was necessary to return and prepare the troops. because even now there is no guarantee that this will not happen again, and they cannot be sure of this. The hero said that they are now not so soon recovering, and now is the time to do a giant. In response to this, the interlocutor said that they were selling them nearby, but it would be difficult to get there without a wagon. Simon turned his attention forward and stated who said that she did not have them right in front of them. Inside, Philip was glad that she was very cool. They did not even expect that they would receive such a car, although the captain scolded him for not remembering what they went through. Now he will train even more diligent, but the Lord's safety is in the first place. The knight asked his uncle to behave calmer, because fortunately, everything ended well. The young gentleman is really fine. The earth fell under the feet of enemies just in time. It must have been a blessing of the ancestors. Simon immediately said the devil would have blessed this blessing, and thought that he was almost dead, being unable to avenge his own curse. When he tried to use dark magic, excitement surged. A certain force stopped a black ball. This is probably also because of a curse. The guy became stronger to get rid of him, but to see this is not enough. The fact who cursed him so much. In the main estate, the capital took a fairly interesting dialogue. There was a recent acquaintance of the protagonist who kneeled and trembled with fear, and in front of them, an important aristocrat was apparently sitting on the throne. He asked if he realized correctly that Darren is now in front of him. The merchant, through fear, stated that this is true, but I wonder why he was called. The interlocutor asked if he remembered the last year's order that came from the leader of the guild. It was necessary to guard the fortress of the King of Demons. The old man stated that the guild almost succeeded in a new one of a villain intervened. The one who called him touched the mask so that she was his face and said that all this one is entertaining. And then he asked if anyone knew for all this. Darren realized that for him, this situation is very bad and asked for mercy, because this time everything would definitely work out. The interlocutor, who was definitely not a man, asked who said he was going to kill him. He in turn is simply very interesting, so let him say who violated plans. After some time, the protagonist, together with his subordinates, arrived in the city of magic towers of Brendan. He was surprised from the scale of these lands, and here it was much more lively than in Lamer. The captain said that it was true. Brendan is known for his magic towers throughout the continent. Because of this, the streets are full of magicians, because merchants and masters of their craft flows here. It is thanks to these people that the city is developing rapidly. That's why this is the best place to buy a giant. There are giants of any rank, from a warrior even to the hero, and some outlets produce even whole giant detachments in a month. Simon noticed that he all advertised so much that even he was in anticipation, and Philip told him that you can no longer look. In this city there is even a branch of the magic tower of Veritas. Since the production of giants began there, the place is authoritative, and most of the most recognizable giants on the continent were made there. The hero remembered for this magic tower and thought, was it really a branch here? And so he remembered his past life, like an aristocrat, told the foreman that he was a genius, and he appropriated the development of Simon. The guy now has the feeling, as if it were yesterday, and the memories were so bright they burst out in 500 years that they even founded the next branch here. In this case, he decided to use this chance to collect more information. They did not want to pay their money, but if everything is in order, he will buy. At the same time, he will take their giant to pieces and recognize his strengths and weaknesses, and also create something better. And soon the guard stopped her new master, stating that only carriers of the title, Baron and above, are not allowed to go here in a row. The main character noticed that this was very rude on his part, because they turned it out, not even making sure of his status. Philip immediately introduced his master, stating that it was Luke, the heir to Baron Lacan. So let them immediately show respect for him, and let them go inside. The guard immediately rushed and asked, "Is it not that poor family, so they really have money for the purchase and repair of a giant?" The captain got angry from this, asking, did he really insult their family? Let them immediately take the words back. Suddenly, Seaman said that they would not pay attention to them, and do not contact them. He also thought that even after so much time they were all the same villains. But the scale is much more impressive than he assumed. This magic tower much cooler than all the towers that he saw with this. Giants from such a workshop should be really very high quality. Then the guy said that these people were still rotten, which was very surprised by the guard. He also turned in the other direction, stating that he was no longer going to spend money in this place, although no one knows the manners. Soon Rogers was angry with himself that he, as the captain, was to blame for making such humiliation, but the master said that this was not his fault. Do they have such a guard? It's still worse inside, so let it think that they were saved from an unnecessary waste of time and better go to another magic tower. In fact, he thought that these people were just scum. This time he will close his eyes to this, because now it is more important to buy a suitable giant. But as soon as he ends in business, he will take revenge on how it should, and now they have arrived in another place. The young duke stated that this place seems good, The interlocutor noticed that it was. This magic tower enters the top 10. He heard them by the speed of production, yet no one bypassed them. Looking around, Seaman noted whether there is good quality in quality, then it is just right for them. Then a man arrived at them, asking what they brought here. His name is Gareth, the chief manager of the modern magic tower. I wonder if they need a specific grant or just look. The hero said that he was looking for a giant for about 30,000 and expect recommendations. The interlocutor immediately said that he would do it in detail about each model. They have giants, more powerful, settlements, protection, and a lot, much more. Simon realized that the explanation is very detailed. Moreover, they are great about their customers. Here people are not judged by their appearance, and it seems that they sincerely care about visitors. That is why it is the opinion that not all magic towers are terrible. And if he likes everything here, then he will buy a giant here. Thinking, he heard the screams that the giant could not be repaired. This disgruntled client shouted, stating that this was a completely clear drawback, because this giant was crushed as a tin can. Simon immediately understood everything and, disappointed, said that he would not waste his time here anymore. Then he deleted this magic tower from his list. After some time, they arrived at the next one. But it was even worse there, so that the tower crossed each other one after another. Walking along the road, he stated that this city specializes in the production of giants, but there is nothing worth here. Roger said when the Empire was strict order to me, "Hi, quality giants were created, but now, unfortunately, money is not solving. And the quality of the manufactured components, and even worse." While the man was talking about this, the hero drew attention to the guy who tried to reach for some person. He said that his giant is completely innovative, but his interlocutor simply pushed him off and said that this beggar hesitated from him. He looked at this. Philip said that he was walking and begging you to look at his drawings. Now it is clear why the quality was so sagging. At the same time, the Seaman did not think so and became interested in this person. Looking at those drawings that were scattered on the ground, he said that this is a rather interesting design. The design is based on the theory of golems, and it can be considered in the old-fashioned, but still not so bad. I also thought that this is probably thanks to MUT's research, but now he can consider giants in more detail. Then he turned to the man who made these drawings and asked how much money he needed. The guy immediately rejoiced and stated, if he speaks seriously, then he needs to finish his work for 10,000 pesos. And in this smiling boy, Seaman saw himself when he was burning with this dream, so he asked to take himself to his workshop. I arrived at the right place. Rogers discussed that the engineer said that there was not enough money, and he thought that he had no equipment. But at the same time, he was mistaken. At least he has his own magic tower, although she looks as if she would fall. The interlocutor said that the last model was sold well, so there was enough money, but the new development requires much more money and time. Almost all people left, and only a couple of people remained. And the people of the young Duke had a question then you are not a deceiver. Finally, they proceeded inside, and the guy said that they should have not been easy for them to get here, but for now, they could simply look around. When Simon saw this giant, he was surprised and asked, was it really Sting? The engineer was surprised that they know about him, and the master added that he saw only once. At the same time, he thought that even then he was struck by a magical equipment, and this guy was not so bad. He just talked about the fact that outside he looked simple, but he was completely different from the outside. They used all the latest technologies of their magic tower, and also remade everything in the internal device, and this is Sting too. Then the hero said that he was intrigued, and I wonder how much time would need. Without hesitation, the guy replied that the main work was done, and only the details remained, so 1 month or 2 would be needed. The master was a little surprising for a long time, but the engineer said that detailed work requires special attention. Moreover, they have few workers, so there will be a lot of time. After thinking about this, the Seaman, then he said he will invest another 20,000 pesos. Let them hire more masters, and it is interesting whether they will lay down a week. The developer was very happy with such news and immediately disappeared, stating that in a minute he would return. Well, he ran very quickly around the magic tower, saying that he had excellent news that they could start work again. And the biggest plus is that they will be very generously paid. The workers were not in the best condition, wondering that they would give them a lot of money. And very soon they returned to the development hall, stating that progress stopped at about 67.3%. The chief engineer remembers that they stopped the development when the magic nucleus was needed. If he does not also conduct night shifts, they will be able to work for 24 hours. Everything was already ready, so you need to start work. The subordinates of the protagonist looked at these people and asked my lord if he was sure to entrust them with a good idea. The hero said that they had nothing to worry about. He knows very well what the masters are obsessed with their business. He is already impatiently the moment when this place will enter the top 10 magic towers. Very soon the night came and calmly slept in their places. But this did not concern the Simon, and he sat somewhere on the roof, wondering that now he received what he needed. So now, looking at the magic tower in which he was not allowed, I decided to start Retribution. The guards, as usual, were calmly on guard, and the nighttime forced them to yawn. Suddenly, one of them heard something stirred in the bushes and had to look at each other. Harding, he asked who was there. Looking around, the guards realized that there was no one there, but it was strange. It turned out that it was a prominent role that they were inflated and made their way through them by the power of darkness. And having opened the doors, I thought about what cost would make everyone pay. Then he made his way through the magic tower in the same way, without attracting attention to himself. The skill that he used was called pitch darkness and could completely hide his presence. Thus, the former king of demons could easily move around sewer communications. And so he made his way to the guards and then to the employee of the tower. At the same time, thinking about the fact that the security is still weak in this tower. But at the same time, it also makes no sense to include around, because they can still catch. That's why he needs to find some good magician, and he just found him soon. This guy was glad that he was able to get inside, because it was worth doing it before, and the guard was really weaker than he might have thought. There is a secret magic archive right in front of him, and you just need to pick up magic books soon. And that's all. In fact, no one is immediately born gifted, and if he only gets books, he can even become stronger than a mid-level max. Although it is not exactly a carrot to go, he may even be able to become a master. The main characters as a shadow followed this person, thinking, wherever you go, there will be such idiots everywhere, although he thinks that it would be enough to follow him enough. And now the victim approached the locked door and tried to open it with manipulations. He thought that even the castle of these people, the simplest and high-ranking magic, so careless. Suddenly, a voice was heard from the back that he said that he did not remember that she had given someone permission to a visit. Thus he becomes wondering if unexpected guests arrived at him. It turns out that he has every right to nail him right at this place, said this was the master of the magic tower, which will be called Veritas Jason. The one who tried to get was immediately scared and wary, said that he simply turned the wrong way. That is why he asks to forgive him only once, although he feels very strong magical pressure. Jason smiled immediately, saying that all this is good. He already thought that this guy was a warrior and accidentally almost harmed the valuable employee of the tower. At the same time, he has a very important scroll with him, especially secret, so you cannot lose, hoping that the interlocutor widely understands his importance. He smiled because he became calmer and said that he understands everything. He always admired him and his efforts in the name of the tower. The old man thanked for his understanding and said that in fact it is quite difficult for him. He also works more importantly, so he must understand him. Because of the new giant of the hero's rank, the so-called employee admired and stated that this was a very rare wounds on the entire continent. The engineer said that this is true. Even the drawings are not just to make, so also protect. The guy understood that these were incredibly drawings of a giant of such a rank. He already sees that this is a real magical masterpiece, and directly feels that its rank is increasing. Suddenly, after a moment, the old man was behind him, asking if he saw it. He asked himself to understand, because he was simply obliged to get rid of everyone who accidentally saw this scroll. The guy asked to wait because this is dishonest, because he himself showed him. Then Jason could not understand what he was talking about. He should not even watch. How sorry for the idiot. The accomplice was still trying to justify himself somehow, but it was too late. The wizard immediately killed him, stating that he crossed all the boundaries of the permitted. And if in turn he had not protruded, then nothing would have happened. And if he was reborn, let him behave the corresponding one. Finally, the protagonist could calmly get out of the body of this stranger. He realized that this old man specifically showed him valuable information to get a reason to kill, and he initially wanted to kill him. In principle, everything, as usual in the Veritas Tower, does not have a single adequate person. When Jason arrived at his office, he immediately thought about the Atlas, saying that you need to talk about the last version of the heroic rank. The analysis of drawings takes more time than he expected, everything very confused, and will have to postpone his plans. Suddenly he felt someone's presence, stating that he did not know who he was, but let him seem right now. Naturally, to those whom he felt was the main character, he asked if this man was a master of the magic tower Veritas. At least he had some kind of chook in his life, because he found the right person. Hurrying up, Jason asked where he came from and why. Simon, in response to this, only smiled, saying that his reasons have been the same for 500 years. He arrived to save the world from such garbage as this very person. The old man was not going to listen to him and immediately applied his magic on him. Then he asked how he dares to say such a saying that he called the master of the Tower of Garbage. Here are a master of such a level that he never dreamed. They are chosen. If he talks like that, he will no longer see the light of the earth. Using dark energy, the guy was already behind him, asking what other chosen ones. Who said this? For so much time they have not changed at all and think that they are somewhat special. And the rest in turn do not even think for some normal people. But from now on, the guy can safely say that their illusions came to an end. The word itself believes, and in turn will be erased from the story. Having said about it, he immediately took advantage of the skill of a bullet of darkness. In the end, the hero heard that the steel magicians were trying not to get involved in the battle, but he did not think that the master would be such a coward. And now who has come to pick up all the cream that he has? It was just about the necessary drawing that was on the table. Looking at him, Simon reduced the whole and realized that there were only a few of them on the whole continent, drawings of a giant of a heroic rank. He does not know what they are doing here, but still use them in the right line. In the secret weapon of the magic tower, Veritas will destroy its abode itself, and this will be a wonderful sight. Declaring this, he could not restrain his laughter. The outcome completely exceeds his expectations. Even such the slightest part will be a huge loss for the tower. But he decided that this would not be enough, so that the dark power that lay around. Given the price of the grimoires that have gathered over the past 500 years, he must leave at least something. The greed tower that was built on the bones of strangers to see the extremely entertaining death. Sometime after the incident, the road train rushed at full speed. Inside it was Seaman, thinking about the fact that the adherents of the tower were now in a panic, yet the main secrets of the tower were burned. This is the same as losing a dozen giants and very bad for them. It is simply amazing that the guy managed to give these valuable drawings and grimoires. They were driven by retaliation. But everything turned out even better than thought. His thoughts were interrupted by Rogers, who said, "It seems he is in a raised mood, and it is interesting what happened." Still, he looks more satisfied than when he received a new giant. In response to this, Seaman smiled, stating that he was simply glad to return to his native lands. Then Philip said that he also wanted to come and relax, but the captain said that he was still training, asking did he really forget what happened to those merchants. If he calls himself a knight, then he needs to be able to defend himself, and as soon as he starts to train. While they chatted, the hero continued to think that he had achieved more than he expected. As soon as he returned, he focuses on restoring his circle. And continuing his path, he suddenly saw something interesting. There, near some building, was Princess Rhine, who apparently prayed. So it really turned out she turned to the great Elskell, and sincerely asked to give her strength to protect all refugees. The Simon became interested in what she was doing, so he got off the roadway and approached her. Turning to the princess, he immediately asked why she came here to pray. At the same time, Rhine did not expect him to see him here, so she looked in surprise, and then asked what he was doing here and dragged his carriage. Soon they moved to another place, and the guy stated that only a lot was shaking. But I wonder why she was not in the Lamer estate. Really with her, Count Monarch dared to do something. The girl noted that it was true he warned them, but everything turned out as it turned out. Just after he left, she thought that the Count would become softer, but he suddenly became even tougher, completely drove them into a corner. At the same time, he did not keep his promise at all, raising a tribute for white people. He even set fire to them at home, because of which many people were injured as well. The girl, in turn, decided that she could no longer remain in the Lamer, so she decided to ask for help from the Marquis Mayors. What is known as the third head of the aristocratic circle? The guy interrupted her, saying that he probably had provided her at a meeting. Raina noted that this was true, so far for sure. Victor joined the conversation, and saying that they had spent 3 days like that for 3 days, and how the guy can see, they are completely driven into a corner. The princess simply could not give up, so she decided to pray until the Marquis invites her to her. Simon noticed that this is quite annoying. She was mocking herself blind, praying to God an answer, from which she will never receive. The old man in defense of the girl immediately shouted that it was rude enough on his part, but the guy asked to think about it himself. Do the Marquis Mayors have at least one reason to help them? He will have to accept dozens of refugees and perhaps even risk unleashing the conflict with Count Monarch, so for him this is a too dangerous idea. What a fool to agree to such a thing. Raina understood that he was really right, but could not do anything. And soon she noticed, so he considers her efforts to be useless. Seaman added that this is exactly what happened to the Lamer did not teach her anything. In order to protect something in this world, power is necessary, and without it, all efforts will be simply futile. The guy perfectly understands that she is not Katarina at all, but not so much similar, and it is alarming. Thus, he simply cannot help but worry about her. Therefore, he said that she would return to her territory, and he would accompany them. To this, the princess immediately stated that she could not do this. She was not going to return until she met with the Marquis. This Seaman even poured out, and he asked if he would really stand on his to the end. But what will happen if he refuses? Does he really die here? Let him just look at the truth. If only he will ask someone to take care of dozens of refugees, then there will only be more problems. Now they care. You need not about refugees, but you need to think at least about yourself. The girl immediately screamed. If she wants to take care of refugees, she needs to become stronger, if it is so necessary. So I wonder how much time it will take. Perhaps you need to wait for months or a year. But if people die during this time, then what is the point? The hero said the answer to this, that they could not save everyone, and she probably wants to die herself, trying to help everyone. Reina was persistent, saying that he really believes that her life is more important than life and her people. The guy immediately and affirmatively told her that this is true, and the interlocutor screamed that he thinks incorrectly, all lives are equally valuable, and her life is no different. It is her inhabitants. They are waiting for her no matter what, and she will not leave her people for anything, because this is her duty. She is not going to do everything for them, only what is in her power. These words seemed very familiar to the guy, and he remembered how Katarina asked why the child should suffer because he was not able to influence. A person should not choose his origin. Then the hero asked her if it seems that this day would come once, and this will be the very day when everyone becomes the same happy. Suddenly the hero asked Reina to be with them 500 years ago. Everything would have happened either or not. The interlocutor was a little surprised of this question and asked in what sense he says. At the same time, the Saman continued to say that he had already forgotten, that he wanted to change the world not only in the name of revenge, but remembered everything now. The princess really did not understand what he was talking about, so she again asked him. The young gentleman answered, thanks to her words, he even wanted to borrow his strength. Therefore he stated that, given the state of her people and their fate, he and the Lacan estate will be on her side. Somewhere at night, the magic tower of Veritas was a strange thing. The guard was raised, because opposite the library a stranger appeared, and all the guards need to go there immediately. But it was necessary to be more careful, because their opponent is a magician. Upon arrival, someone asked him, did he really set fire to the library? The stranger, at the same time, was surprised from the state of their guards, is not even able to admit who in front of them. The guard did not want him to listen to him, and stated that he would not move, because he was surrounded. Suddenly, one of them drew attention to the back of this man and saw 7 lilies there. So I immediately realized who it was and ordered everyone to discard the weapons. And also let them express tribute to the 7th foreman of the magic tower of Veritas. Pierrot Otteran, who was, asked them where the manager of the tower. The guard noted that the department is in the library, and he spends it there. At the same time, the foreman asked him if he was responsible for guarding here. The guy was wary, but stated that it was true. And then the interlocutor approached him, saying that he would not need support, because accompaniment with such a fool is simply disgusting. The head of the guard was immediately killed, and Pierrot continued to say that the magic towers of Veritas are unnecessary, such losers. Once a very long time in the water, a boy drowned, who begged to at least someone saved him. Not far from this place was the main character along with Katarina. He shouted that the child would die at this pace, so he would ask for help in the nearest village. But preparing to help, the girl said that she was already too late, so she would go there. The guy tried to stop her, but did not have time to do it, because she was already in the water. Fortunately, I swam for quite well and pulled the boy's body ashore. To all this, she also gave him first aid and pumped out from the water, rejoicing that this is incredible happiness from the fact that he was breathing again. At the same time, the Saman was not so happy, asking the girl why she risks so much she could, and herself suffers here. Katarina noted that she knew that it was careless, and in the water she was even scared. Heroes could not understand why she did this, but the interlocutor said that everything was very simple. To save someone else's life, you need to act in the moment. Remembering this, the seaman thought that the girls were similar only externally, but they were also equally careless. He also wanted to feel about something, but suddenly they turned to the young master. It was Philip, who said that he had heard that he agreed to accept all the refugees, so he really wants to unleash the war with Count Monac. Captain Rogers also joined him, agreeing with this statement. After all, they obviously will have to face the Count, although on their lands everything has finally got better, and they are simply not ready for conflicts. The knight added that this is true absurd is not too late, so let him say that nothing will work out. The guy thinks that circumstances do not yet allow them to get involved in the war, because the Count has dozens of giants. Even if the great hero Lacan rebelled from the dead, but they would not have won, Seaman really did not like what they were saying, and he shouted angrily to cover their mouths because they were not a decree for him. At the same time, Philip continued to argue with him, saying that the master had gone crazy their 30,000, and they could not feed their people. He continued to repeat him for a long time why this was not to do, but the Simon said that he would stop. At the same time, the interlocutor was not going to stop and said that he would continue to speak. He does not put him as his guard every day. No matter how beautiful the princess is, this is too much. He simply does not want people to laugh at him, because the girls do not like him, and probably never met anyone. So you need to count honestly, he wants to accept refugees only for the sake of the princess. The gentleman smiled kindly, but it was clear why he did this and asked to apologize. Philip tried to say that it was just a joke, but it was already very late. Some time passed, and they have already begun to discuss the number of refugees. In a conversation, the knight said, "If many people can be seen at once, then they will attract unnecessary attention." The duke noticed that it was true that they would immediately arrange a persecution. By the sea it would be possible to quickly get to the lands of Lacan, but now is the season of drought, so the ships are in the flight, and to move on the ground for too long, so they clearly will not avoid ambush. Rogers asked then. Maybe he could wait until it would be possible to go on the ship. But Philip put forward the idea. Why not collect enough troops in order to fight off the prying pursuers? Simon answered, even if they go by sea, the situation will not change much. They probably have their own warships, so they will be easily caught. And if they take the armed army with them, then they will declare war, and it is quite difficult to fight against Count Monac. They simply cannot allow him to enlist the support of the emperor. Then he raised the question of what to do and what ideas should be developed. The protagonist immediately said that only one exit remains, and this is a movement along the river. Victor was surprised from this idea, noticed that they could not use the ship. Simon explained, they just using this circumstance as their advantage, because they still have a lot of time to prepare. During this time, they will build rafts, because the river is too narrow for the ship, but for the fleet, just right. At the same time, they need to make them large enough so that everyone will fit, but it will not take much time. Philip liked this idea. He said that if they use the fetus, he will just stay on the water, and it will take much less time. The captain was surprisingly opposed, stating that boards of this size would be extremely slow. If they are linked along the shore, they will simply be trapped. Even if it does not use only a long-range attack, they still have to defend themselves. Simon smiled and said that Rogers, as always, is accurate, but do not worry because he had already thought out everything, and they simply use the road train that has been selected not long ago. It will simply connect the rafts among themselves, and then they will tie them to the main car. It is quite fast, so chasing them will be very difficult. The interlocutors were delighted, but any load can really translate into the car, and at the same time it is very fast. Then the problem was found by Victor. He said that it was a pity, but they did not have the opportunity to create such large rafts. And again, the young master asked not to worry about it. He still had money after buying a giant. The butler princess was very happy thanks to him. The guy noted that it was trifles. As soon as they arrived in his land, he would send them 30,000 pesos. So you need to try on the raft, worrying about this situation of the district. She said that she was very sorry. She knew that she would not just help all her people. The master even agreed to me, in which case to confront the Count of Monac, and this could harm his own lands. Simon smiled and asked her not to worry, because the victory would be behind them. Philip also confirmed this, saying that she would trust the young master, like Rogers that they said, and so planned to repulse the Count. At the same time, the Seaman continued to say that now they should act first, and most importantly in the preservation to get to the river. Therefore he asked the princess if he could be sure that she would bring all people. She smiled and said that he could be sure, because they would do everything possible. Jason was sitting in his office thinking that he had recently happened. Suddenly someone came to him, starting with him. It was the recently arrived Pierrot, which he said not surprising that such a gentleman had such wards. Jason immediately realized who this asked what brought the foreman here. He thinks that it is time to take responsibility for the fire, and he has nothing to lose, so let them do whatever he wants. The interlocutor stated the fact that they should be punished, but at first he wants to ask something, and he asked what they did with those important drawings. Jason was very surprised, and the man said that he knew very well that they stole them, but wanted to observe and understand with whom they planned all this. He does not know why he needed to steal it, and it is very surprising enough. Suddenly the managing tower carefully looked at his interlocutor and asked who he was at all. Pierrot was a little surprised from this, not understanding why he was asking this. The old man said that he met with all the foremen of the Veritas Tower, and they all have a huge amount of mana, but at the same time, he never saw such expressive energy as his. Pierrot was in a few seconds behind him, claiming what he heard. He was a steam genius with Albert before this incident, it seems. This is true. And then he headed for his dark power right into the interlocutor. After that, as if through matter, he climbed into his head. And there, through many identical magic balls, he got to the fact that he needed. And of course, this immediately removed him from his head. He further stated that the old man himself would not tell him anything, so he would have to make sure everything on his own, and he would just find out where the drawings are. With the help of his own strength, he saw what was happening and which person arrived at Jason. But what was seen by this evil spirits was very surprised. The skill that he saw was a bullet of darkness, so the thief was a dark magician. In this case, things are bad after the death of the King of Demons 500 years ago. Only one lover of dark magicians remained. And we are talking about the Dark Moon of the Republic of the Volga. But he could not believe that they could stand behind this. The Republic of Volga was founded after the fall of the monarchy, and the fact that the elves control the elves are still a secret. People have oppressed them since ancient times. Pierrot suspected that they were plotting something. But I did not think that they would begin to act so quickly, because now they are quite fame. While they become stronger, having studied dark magic, they will be able to resist even the Baroque Empire. Although this will not happen now, so far they need time. And if they create a giant of a legal rank, the Empire will definitely decide to interfere with them, then nothing will remain of them. And in this case, he decided that he must have taken the drawing. And for this, he used his own skill and created something similar to the larva that made his way into Jason's ear. And very soon his lifeless body, which lay dead, rose. He called Pierrot the Great Lord with rotten blood and broken bones, and also swore allegiance. The Dark Wizard said that he had placed his worm's ear just in case, and once he would come in handy. Now everything was ready, and he was going to go north. When the main character arrived at his estate, everyone found out about what happened. Hans was horrified, saying that these people dared to encroach on the life of a young master. That count, just a disgusting person. They noticed. They even got their own grant. So I think they were originally aimed at Lake and Earth. Dixon confirmed that the previous incident with the giant of their hands was also. Then they discussed the likelihood that she was preparing for war for the land, although the war needed official approval from the imperial family and advisor. They, in turn, do not have this permission, while graphomaniacs have ties with the imperial family. So for him, this is not a problem. To get approval, there is nothing to do. Dixon, he asked, can they be in such circumstances to accept refugees? They already have few funds for the maintenance of their lands. It seems a lot of money to feed so many inhabitants. Suddenly those present heard some strange sound, so the knights rushed there. Philip already shouted that these were scum that did not understand whose territory they entered. But at the same time, to his surprise, the bottom, he saw her master, who asked, was it really some kind of special greeting? The interlocutor noted that he simply thought that he was an enemy and wondering where he was. And even more interesting is what is behind him. The guy that found them there, that he was just informed by a treasure hidden by the King of Demons. It turns out that he examined his castle and found all this under the rubble. Judging by the number of treasures, the King of Demons hid, and so they were forgotten. The captain asked if they could definitely take them, that if the treasures were damned. Dixon, who was nearby, asked him to stop his mouth. Is he really afraid of some fables when the lands are on the verge of bankruptcy? Let him just forget about this curse and that's it. Now all this belongs to them. And even if at least the grandfather of the King of Demons will come, he will not give anything. The hero rejoiced that in fact, even before the excavations of the mine, he knew about the reserves accumulated with the help of golems and monsters, and if they want to accept refugees, then money would be needed and remained in defense. Now that they figured it out, only one thing remains the main problem, so he turned to Rogers, declaring that he would like him to help him something. And now, after some time, the Simon was on the training ground. I think that it is necessary to study magic, which has become much stronger in 500 years, and expand the magic circle. If he finds himself in a situation where he does not go out to use magic or collides with an enemy against which it does not act, he will have to go the other way. The captain interrupted his thoughts, stating that he was worried, because he had not trained with a sword for a long time. But at the same time, he is very surprised that the guy himself asked for Deli with him. Simon smiled and asked, doesn't the descendant of the Laken family know how to hold the sword? And Rogers was happy to hear it from him. After that, the hero immediately rushed to the attack, saying that it was necessary to start. And their battle began and passed quite rapidly. The Opponite looked at the movements and said that even though the guy had not held the sword in his hands for a long time, but it seemed to him not to worry. It seems that the guy moves even better and has become much stronger. And it is also great that he quickly reads the movement of the enemy. In the process, he thought about how it was expected from a descendant of the great hero. Probably he still trained in a secret. However, despite all its strength, this will definitely not be enough. So, continuing the battle, he said, let the attacks on his own in this way. He will be able to deliver a response and wrap the course of the battle in his favor. Also, when the Simon attacked him, the man said that he was moving too slowly. He gives his enemy even more advantages. The guy thought that his experience, unfortunately, with many knights, would now help him now, but the rivals are clearly stronger than him. Soon the captain asked why he did not inflict a single solidly, but a blow, and where his confidence went. Well, he is still surprised at how much more it behind, and it even scares him a little. He could even defeat the King of Demons, who lived as many as 500 years ago. Just like the hero Lacan, who was his same ancestor, the hero was angry and understood from whom the Philip had all this. At the same time, he did not expect an equal battle, but now a little surprised. He further said that he needed to deliver at least one blow, otherwise he would not fall asleep today. And in order to do this, he took advantage of the magical skill of physical strengthening, and thanks to him he was near the captain in a moment. He immediately said that he would think he really surprised him. When the opponent repelled the guy's attack, he greatly surprised the advice. He did not expect this. The captain said at the same time did not think that he could move so quickly, and it was amazing. In this case, the question arises that he really restrained his strength against him all this time, but he was very surprised by the Saman that it was probably the golden sword of the Lacan.